Hello, everyone, and welcome to the future of entrepreneurship and higher education. We're incredibly excited to welcome you today to share interesting discussions, groundbreaking interviews, and a lot of different and emerging perspectives on both the future of higher education and the intersection of that with the entrepreneurial and innovation economy. We'd like to give a special thanks to our presenting partner, AWS Edstart, as they prepared a fantastic panel on trends in EdTech and entrepreneurship, but more on that later. My name is Alec Wright, and I'm the Chief Innovation Officer here at One Valley. You'll be seeing me throughout the day, but what you're really here for is this great group of speakers and conversations that we've pulled together on today's topic. We'll be kicking off with a conversation and a presentation from Nikhil Sinha, CEO of One Valley, focused on trends in higher education in the intersection with the innovation economy. We'll then move into an incredible conversation about entrepreneurship at universities in the post-pandemic world with Dr. Pradeep Khosla, Chancellor of the University of California, San Diego. We'll be moving then into a panel on next-gen entrepreneurial programs inside universities. Well, I'll have the chance to talk with two great university entrepreneurship leaders. And then we'll be bringing it to our friends, AWS Edstart, to discuss the emerging trends in EdTech and entrepreneurship that are defining today and will define the next couple of years. We'll then have an opportunity to learn more about the University of North Texas Murphy Center of Entrepreneurship and how they support and engage early stage entrepreneurs. And we'll be seeing three great early stage UNT startups to get a sense of the type of companies that are coming from that ecosystem. And certainly last but not least, we'll be wrapping up on the future of higher education and some of the disruption and opportunities that are in front of us in a conversation with Rick Levin, the former president of Yale University and a senior advisor and former CEO of Coursera. So we're so excited to be able to spend today, having these conversations with you. But before we get started, I'd like to share a little bit of background on One Valley. One Valley is a global entrepreneurship and innovation platform that supports entrepreneurs, it accelerates startups, and we empower organizations that foster innovation globally. We have a community and ecosystem of over 200,000 entrepreneurs that come from over 100 different countries, and this community's raised 1.5 billion since 2015. And we support this community through resources, programming, mentorship, and then dozens of events every year, just like this, focused on trends and opportunities in the market. To get us started, it's my pleasure to introduce Nikhil Sinha, CEO of One Valley, to share his thoughts on some of the trends in higher ed and entrepreneurship that are defining today and tomorrow. Nikhil, please take it away.
Thank you, Alec, and welcome everyone to this important session on higher education trends and the entrepreneurship imperative. As most of you know, higher education institutions have been at the forefront of innovation and entrepreneurship in the United States for at least 200 years. The question we're going to address in this conference is how can higher education institutions continue to be that catalyst for innovation and entrepreneurship? How can they continue to lead in these sectors in the wake of the changes because of the pandemic? Higher education institutions experienced unbelievable challenges in 2020. Many of you experienced those challenges yourself and in the institutions at which you work. Only 3% of US universities were fully in person in the fall of 2020. And we saw a significant decline in enrollments, with only about 80% of normal enrollments being experienced by community colleges. The impact on research was even more significant. About 3/4 of all companies either extended, delayed, or canceled their collaborations with universities, and about 2/3 of all STEM research was delayed or discontinued due to the pandemic. Of course, the impact of the pandemic was not felt on educational institutions alone. Over the course of 3 months, we saw about a 33% reduction in economic activity and over 22 million jobs were lost. Many higher education institutions rose to meet this challenge. And I know that many of you worked very hard over the last 15 months to be able to provide continuity to your students, experience and deliver a significant um, teaching learning experience, as well as continue the research in your institutions. But nevertheless, there are still challenges, and we need to reimagine many aspects of the university experience, as well as our value proposition coming out of the pandemic. Fortunately, the history of higher education, innovation, and entrepreneurship has actually been rooted in crises, both national crises as well as the crises we found in universities. The end of the Civil War is a great example of the need for innovation and the ways in which the universities rose to the challenge. In the wake of the Civil War, we needed new ways of efficiently producing food and distributing it around the country. The Land Grant College Act of 1862 became the catalyst for the innovation that was going to be driven from higher education institutions across the country. Farmers' institutes, agricultural and mechanical focused universities codified the knowledge, developed new farming techniques, and shared best practices both within and across institutions. This was, in fact, one of the first examples of systematic innovation being commercialized out of educational institutions. The outcome of this was an increase in the number of farms of around 3 times between 1860 and 1905 alone, and a phenomenal rise in the number of higher education institutions in the country as well, going from about just 50 at the beginning of the 19th century to over 600 by the end of that century. Today, there is a similar innovation imperative, but in dozens of areas, not just one. Firstly, we are all aware of the challenges of climate change and the need to find more innovative ways of generating energy, of reducing carbon emissions, and restoring the climate. Similarly, global health and wellness continue to be challenging areas. The pandemic itself led to significant innovations, for instance, in the creation of vaccines, but we need to be ready for the challenges of the 21st century. Hunger and malnutrition continue to plague different parts of the world, and we need to continue to invest in finding new ways to feed the population. Financial inclusion remains an issue with millions of people across the world unable to access banking and other resources. And finally, all of this needs to be done in developing sustainable communities that can combine growth as well as environment sustainability. Underlying all of this is the need for us to continue to educate our population, both in the US as well as around the world, both in the K through 12 environment, but also in higher education as well. The need for this kind of innovation cannot be, is very significant at this moment in time. We're about to lose 20 years of sustainable development just because of the pandemic. But also, fortunately, the economic and business circumstances provide us the opportunity to continue to develop innovative solutions. If you look at the applications for the creation of new companies, particularly high propensity business applications, we've seen that really soar during the pandemic. There has never been, in fact, a better time to be an innovator. Internet access now is fairly ubiquitous. Over 4.5 billion people have access to the internet. There are about 6 billion smartphones around the world, 258 app downloads, and the cost of computing and the cost of innovation continues to decline. There's been a 99% cost reduction in the cost of computing since 2000 alone, and over 90% decline in software development costs due to innovations such as no-code platforms. Regions that produce 1 billion technology companies have gone from 4 in 2013 to over 80 in 2019. And so the question is, what is the future of university-driven entrepreneurship and innovation? And over the next few hours, we will debate this with some of the experts from institutions and from corporations that are focused on driving innovation and entrepreneurship around the world. We're going to kick off this day with a conversation with Dr. Pradeep Khosla, the Chancellor of the University of California, San Diego.
Good morning, Nikhil. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Before we get the conversation going, let me give you a few minutes to introduce Chancellor Khosla. Pradeep is an internationally recognized and renowned electrical and computer engineer, recognized for his seminal contributions in secure software, intelligent robot systems, and design. As UC San Diego's Chief Executive Officer, Pradeep provides vision and strategy, leading a campus of more than 40,000 students with 7 undergraduate colleges and 12 academic institutions, academic divisions and graduate schools, with a preeminent health system and of course the prestigious Scripps Institute of Oceanography. Under Pradeep's leadership, UC San Diego has expanded college access and affordability for undeserved students, initiated campus-wide interdisciplinary research initiatives to foster collaboration and solve societal challenges, created bench-to-bedside patient care, and strengthened research and community partnerships to drive regional impact. Welcome again, Pradeep.
Thank you.
I'd like to start with the UC San Diego experience in the wake of the pandemic, during the pandemic and in the wake of the pandemic. How did the campus respond to the pandemic, and how did you manage your research and teaching programs during this period?
So great question. In fact, great questions. There are many, many questions in there. So let me give you the highest level parameters. All throughout the pandemic, starting fall up to now, we had like 9,000 plus students on campus, one of the largest on-campus populations in the country, if not the largest. During the fiscal year of the academic year of the pandemic, we increased our research by more than 50 million. So we are the highest indirect cost recovery this year than ever before. And one of the things that worked, and during this pandemic, we had 0 outbreaks on campus. So on one hand, you can say we were extremely fortunate. On the other hand, you can say that we were great strategists and executed well. I think the answer is a little bit of both. There was good strategy, there was good execution, there was great behavior by the students, perfect behavior by the students, something that people did not expect, and a little bit of dumb luck, and it goes far away, let's put it that way.
And as you're looking forward now into the fall, what's your thinking about the changes that sort of are being introduced within the campus as a consequence of the pandemic? Right. And then what are you seeing, in universities around the country in terms of the changes that are now being introduced on campuses?
Yeah, so, I've taken, Nikhil, I tell you, this pandemic and managing this, I learned a lot about things one should have known about human behavior and how to manage large-scale change. So one of the things I learned is, instead of mandating or forcing large-scale change from the top, one needs to create the right conditions amongst the rank and file so that they internalize and embrace change of their own free volition. So one of the things we realized is, before this pandemic, our faculty were against, for example, online teaching. During the pandemic, they had to do this overnight because of necessity. Not that it was a perfect transition. Some you still think that it is not a great way to do business, but it's an accepted way of doing business. And now we are finding that faculty want to use, for example, their summer quarters when they're traveling and doing field work in the Middle East or in Asia or in Europe. They want to be able to teach, and remote teaching becomes a very accepted form of delivery of education, where they can be doing their work simultaneously and teaching, right? So this was one of the things. So what I'm trying to do now is, instead of saying we are going to create online this and online that, I'm trying to create a situation where everybody feels comfortable proposing their ideas and finding ways of embracing their ideas and making them part of our culture and who we are.
Just one more question around the pandemic, and then sort of we'll move on to other subjects. What impact do you think that the pandemic had, both in the amount of research that was conducted over the last year, and where do you see the research trajectory going, but also the kind of research that you're continuing to support on the university, whether you're thinking about what areas the campus should be investing in, and the interest level of faculty in different areas, whether that's changed because of the pandemic in any way.
Right. So in some sense, I think what has happened is the interest areas have not changed, but there is a greater intensity in some areas. So for example, 8 years ago, when we finished our strategic plan, one of the areas was understanding cultures and addressing disparities. If there was one thing about this pandemic that was crystal clear to even the most oblivious person, it was that the disparities have basically increased across every level: healthcare, education, economic. I can just go down the list, right? So this is an area we had identified 8 years ago, because this is the way I thought society was headed, and we wanted to be part of it, as in fixing it. And now it has become more intensified. So it's not like we discovered something new, but we discovered more intense interest in this. So I'm going to be investing more in this area, more in public health, for example. Understanding public health. People knew many years ago that using cell phones to change your behavior for taking your diabetes medicine could lead to better outcomes, but we never quite understood how to scale it. There were these point experiments that were done, but now there are ways of scaling or changing or having people internalize new behavior modes for their own good and for the good of everybody else. So those are the areas using more digital technology, more IT to really influence and change behaviors.
This idea of using technology to change behaviors and how it fits into the research, innovation, and mission of the university, I think is really important. Universities have, particularly universities in California and UCSD amongst them, have really been the breeding ground of new ideas and new entrepreneurs, not just innovation in form of basic research, but also then the fostering of entrepreneurship.
Right.
And we've seen in recent years sort of a proliferation of entrepreneurial focused programs within campuses. What do you think is sort of driving this interest in entrepreneurship, and how do you see, when you see the students coming into the campus, how do you see and how do you foster for them this sort of continued interest in creating new businesses?
So let's see if I can take like a contrary position. Half my position would be contrary. I think part of the reason that's driving this interest is the wrong reason. For example, the reason is that most presidents, not most, many presidents and chancellors, and even maybe some trustees believe that one can commercialize the IP and the patents and stuff like that. And one should be aggressively finding ways to generate revenue sources using that. It's a great reason, but it's the wrong reason, because that the consequence of commercializing IP, it's not clear that universities make a lot of money commercializing IP, right? But nonetheless, that's driving entrepreneurship across campuses. My model of driving entrepreneurship, well, my reason is one of causing economic activity and change in the vicinity of the campus, even if the campus gets zero royalties and zero direct benefit from commercializing IP. Because I think our benefit will emerge from creating jobs, creating wealth, and over time. So this is, if I may say so, the Stanford model of life, right? Many, many years ago, this was a model that was used as in enabling activity was more important than driving activity. So that's where I am at.
Right. As a reminder to the audience, you have the opportunity to ask questions of Professor and Chancellor Khosla So please use the chat function to ask questions at any time during this session. One of the things that we've seen, Pradeep, in terms of the research and innovation activity in campuses has been always this continued challenge of doing technology transfer, and how do we convert the work that's being done on the campus into either commercial enterprises, or being able to at least use that research and that know-how to further at least corporate or business applications. How do you view this problem? What have you been doing at UCSD to try and accelerate that process of making an impact from the work that's being done on the campus?
So Nikhil, this is where I think one needs to ask oneself, why do you want to do tech transfer? Why do you want to enable good ideas to go outside the campus, right? Like I was saying before, many presidents and chancellors believe that this can generate a lot of revenue and new source of revenue. I think it's a mistaken belief. So that's not my goal. My goal is to be the enabler of economic activity outside the campus. So if you see what my goal is, now I don't insist on what the royalty should be, what the equity split should be. So my model is a simple model of 5% and go in peace. And you and I talked about it in my prior life at Carnegie Mellon. And the whole idea is give the campus 5% of basic equity, and then we'll help you raise money. We will give you the IP you need, and we will make your life comfortable, and we will pay for your success every morning. So that model we are adopting and adapting in the UC system, especially San Diego, within San Diego. And I think it's working really well. So my dictum to my people is, if somebody wants to license technology from UC San Diego, the conversation should be no more than 1 hour, and the total time elapsed should be no more than 1 week, and the agreement should be no more than 5 pages. End of story. So if you follow these constraints, you can see you'll be forced into the right answer or doing things the right way.
As you've sort of been implementing these policies, have you seen a change in more recently or more generally about the ability to translate university research into business applications?
So we have at UC San Diego, so we are the top 5 generators of commercial entities now, like startups in the country. If you look at our 5-page agreement, I think it's 4 pages, it's on the website. The lawyers can pre-vet it. You as an entrepreneur come to me, I sign it, you sign it, we are done, right? I'm seeing happier faculty members. I'm not hearing any complaints from the community. When I got here 8 years ago, they were complaining about how difficult it is to work with the UC, and especially San Diego. And now I hear that in the bigger context of just the UC, but not much about San Diego.
Do public universities face a particular challenge here versus, you've had the experience of being Dean of Engineering at Carnegie Mellon, great private institution, and then now Chancellor at UC San Diego. What's the difference that you think in terms of being able to foster entrepreneurship and innovation on campus?
So first of all, the level of bureaucracy in a public institution is way higher than in a private institution. And part of it is just the nature of the beast, where the oversight leads to bureaucracy, and oversight is considered to be a way of protecting public assets, even though if you look at the implementation, oversight actually leads to a lot more bad behaviors than not. But that's just the nature of this beast. That's just the nature of the public institution. So that creates a slight problem. Secondly, a lot of people, rightly motivated, feel like they're the protectors of public property. And now you have to start answering and satisfying a whole bunch of questions, including requests for information. And it leads decision makers to become very conservative, most likely for no good reason. But on the other hand, it's an easy strategy to pursue.
Yeah.
Right. And me being the risk taker, I rarely take the easy path, as you know.
Indeed. Once again, reminder to the audience, feel free to jump in and ask questions at any time. The university, I understand the challenge of public institutions, but the University of California system in particular actually has done quite well in being able to become a real hotbed of entrepreneurship and innovation. What do you think distinguishes the University of California system and what are the enablers of the sort of the impact that the university has been able to create?
So I think if you look at all the public university systems, and I might be a little bit biased, but not quite, I think the University of California is an exemplar of the greatest public university system, not just in this country, but in the world. It really is. I mean, there is no, so we are 10 campuses and 7 of our campuses are in the AAU, of which there's only 30 public institutions there. So every one of our campuses is research heavy. If you look at the research funding, 10% of NIH's research funding or 10% of the country's federal money comes to California and primarily to UC San Diego. Primarily to the University of California system. And there's 3 or 4 campuses here, like mine, San Diego's $1.5 billion in research. San Francisco's $1.5 billion in research. UCLA, UC Berkeley. So you can go down the list, and we are the top 5, top 7 campuses in the country. I think the government, the state investment in the UC system until about 15 years ago was truly spectacular. And then we had some bad times post 2000. And now we are seeing again the emergence of good times where there's more investment being made, and for right purposes, because we are driving the economy in this state.
Indeed, and I think that role is played by other public institutions in their states as well, but perhaps not as extensively as we've been able to do here in California.
So for example, look, we have like 10% of the country's population with many spectacular, but the greatest public system. Texas, which is a large state, New York, which is a large state, does not have the same level of public university system as we do.
And sort of what's your thinking about it as to the reasons for that? Is that because of, state policy or, because of, and of course, everybody talks about Silicon Valley, but, the relationship between the universities and the growth of technology hubs like Silicon Valley is mutual and reinforcing. But the question is, why is California why is the public education system so much more robust and excellent in California as compared to other states?
So I don't know the answer to that, but my hypothesis, Nikhil, is that compared to our size, we did not have that many private institutions delivering education. So we had to build a great public institution. But if you look at, for example, New York, that's not true. I mean, I can count several private institutions in New York which existed. So maybe the need for public institutions was not that great. I don't know. This is my hypothesis.
We have a couple of questions coming in from the audience, Pradeep.
Yeah, go for it.
And one of this you just addressed, which is, why does California have so many top universities in the country? The other question is sort of what's exciting you right now about the future of higher education?
Actually, the thing that is exciting me is I think because of this pandemic, in a very unfortunate way, higher education is at an inflection point. And I think we're going to see inflection in, for example, how we deal with information technology and technology in education, inflection in our behaviors on a day-to-day basis, inflection in integrating social sciences with technology. I can see a lot of really good things happening. And I think higher education is at the cusp of really understanding how to put it all together and be the exemplar for even industries like Google and Facebook and other large companies with a very large workforce that are not delivering education, but nonetheless have the same challenge of having a large campus, large number of people coming to campus, managing security, health, and all the good stuff.
Talk to us a little bit, there's been this debate between the role, particularly of public institutions as being important centers for teaching. But as we've been able to show in California, and other public institutions have been able to show, that they're also really the source of great research and innovation as well. How do institutions balance out this, competing focus on excellent teaching versus, the continued focus on research?
So I think it's a false dichotomy that has been created, and I don't know how it got created. Great teaching and great research, in my mind, are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they should be mutually inclusive. They are two sides of the same coin. And I can go down the list of at least half a dozen great institutions in this country, and we all know what they are, where they're great teachers and great researchers, and they're number one or top five in both of them, right? So I think we need to make sure that we don't create this false dichotomy, which then becomes self-perpetuating truth. And people start saying, oh, because I'm doing research, I cannot teach, or because I'm teaching, I cannot do research. I think we have to do both. I can see different levels of research. So for example, the UC system is more research intensive than the Cal State system. But nonetheless, for an educator to be current, you have to be current in not only creating knowledge, but also disseminating knowledge, and ways of creating knowledge and ways of disseminating knowledge. So you can see I'm talking about research and education in the same breath here.
We have another question coming in from the audience. Do you think the pandemic will serve as a catalyst to help create better equity and parity amongst universities? Will this trickle into democratizing access to higher education?
Actually, I am concerned that the pandemic will not be a catalyst for creating better, more equity. I hope I'm wrong, but my instinct is that it's not going to be the case. So let me tell you why I think so. I think during the pandemic, a lot of institutions were hurt. The state institutions were hurt because of budget cuts, and the private institutions were hurt because they lost one-time, resources, and now they have to make up for it. Until there is a greater emphasis on lowering the cost of education, on creating more access to education across the whole strata of economic, how should I say, from low socioeconomic people to high, to economically advantaged people, the access is to be pretty much nearly equal. And I don't see that happening very soon. I see that happening in the public institutions, especially in California, where if your family makes less than $80,000 a year, you pay no tuition. End of story. I see that happening in New York, in Texas, but unless that happens across the board, and it's not happening in private institutions, so I don't see how that equity happens.
And in fact, we're seeing some of the effect of that in terms of the closure of several colleges around
Yes.
the country, including, particularly the small liberal arts colleges.
Yep.
Have suffered enormously. So, what can we do? What do you think sort of the policy, and is there a policy intervention that continues to find a way to support institutions of higher education, many of whom provide college opportunities to students which would not be available otherwise?
Indeed true. Look, everybody provides these opportunities, from the richest to the poorest, from public to private. The scale is different. The private institutions provide these opportunities, but they are not able to scale, partly because of their size, not because of their resources, right? Secondly, I think there is this twisted thinking, and let me see if I can articulate this. I think if you look at the output of the higher education institution, which becomes the input to industry, industry uses institutions' ranking and visibility as a proxy for the quality of individual coming out. And what this perpetuates is this class system, which then limits students who went to, let's say, what are perceived to be B+ public institutions, job prospects, which then limits their ability to get better students the next year around. So I think we have to make sure that we are not using the reputation of university as a proxy for the quality of individuals coming out. And then the universities use that as a proxy for admitting. I mean, they use like the selectivity as a criteria for their quality, which doesn't make sense. And this is what, in my mind, perpetuates inequities.
And just that, remaining on the topic of the quality of students coming in and being educated, the University of California is in the process of rethinking the role of standardized testing in the admission process, and many other institutions around the country are doing that as well. Talk to us a little bit about what the thinking is behind that reevaluation of standardized testing, and whether you think that eliminating reliance on those tests as a criteria for admission will help change the nature of students who get accepted into the top institutions.
So look, this is the first year of no SAT scores being accepted. So it's still premature to talk about what might happen. I mean, I can hypothesize, but I can tell you, and just like in the country, in the UC system, the faculty, there is a class of people who believe in the power of standardized tests. There's a class of people who believe it causes inequities because it's reasonably well documented that if you come from middle to higher income family, the likelihood of you scoring higher in the SAT is way better than if you come from a lower income family, just because you don't have access to. So now even the SATs are trying to create testing strategies that basically factor in or don't let that type of influence come into the testing strategy, right? So there's a whole lot of debate going on. There's a whole lot of change happening. Look, I'm personally supportive of no SATs because I think 1 3-hour test or whatever the number of hours is cannot be the main determine whether you should be accepted or not. Your GPAs for the last 4 years, your essays, your portfolio. I mean, we have to look at multiple things, and the life you led, the challenges you overtook, the challenges you overcame. So all of these have to be factored in, and that's the holistic admissions process. It's a tedious way of doing admissions, but in my mind, if done right, it is the right way of doing admissions.
Yeah, and related to that, there's a question from the audience about addressing the issue of underrepresentation of certain groups in higher education admissions and access to higher education. More generally, other than the issue of standardized testing, what is the university doing in terms of providing opportunities to underrepresented groups to get a college education?
So look, for example, at UC San Diego, when I came here, we had like 1.8% African-American students in our population. Now it is slightly more than 3%. It was 14% Chicanx and Latinx. Now it is close to 21%. We are an emerging Hispanic serving institution. Part of it is because of the population demographics, but part of it is also because of our strategies of looking at 4th and 5th quintile high schools and creating opportunities for those students rather than going only to the top 2 quintile high schools and only the private high schools, right? So by our mandate, we are supposed to be accepting about 10% of the top students in California. But 10% can be defined multiple ways. 10% can be you aggregate all the students and 10% from there, or 10% of every high school, for example. So we try to do both. We have something called eligibility in the local context, where we give special considerations to students in the local context of the university and the 4th and 5th quintile high school. So I think we are one of the main drivers, not only of equity, but also of economic and social mobility.
We've got tons of questions now coming in from the audience, so I'm going to try to that. Going back to the topic of entrepreneurship and the role of universities in fostering entrepreneurship, a question from the audience is that in terms of working with startups, does UCSD focus primarily on fostering startups on campus through interdisciplinary partnerships internally, or do you also work with outside businesses to try and foster entrepreneurship?
Actually, both of all of the above. In addition, we also work with established companies to license some of our technologies. So on my campus, we have like 6 different divisions who have their own incubators. And my philosophy of incubators and entrepreneurship on campus is enable everybody and control nobody. So I want to enable all the deans to do what they think is right for their students, drop down all the walls of collaboration. And we have something called the basement where anybody can come and petition to start a company, and we support them. And they can be undergrad, grad, staff, faculty, we don't care. So, and we also work with outside places like Connect and Biocom and agencies like that to send our startups there. After they graduate from here, they go there.
Yeah, and as I think at One Valley, we have several university partners that we work with, and they leverage our platform to engage with the entrepreneurial communities, both inside as well as outside of the campus. You talked a little bit about what you're doing on campus to support entrepreneurship and the formation of new companies. How does the university support the larger entrepreneurial community in the San Diego and California area? So, just outside of the campus, how do you engage with the startup ecosystem?
So our tech transfer, commercialization, innovation, entrepreneurship office is the interface both for the inside and outside. So there's a couple of ways we engage. So there's something called Connect. It's a nonprofit in San Diego, which actually was created at UC San Diego by UC San Diego. Then it kind of grew up and we spun it out, and now it's an independent entity. So many of my faculty, including myself, we serve on the board of Connect and other nonprofit incubators or for-profit incubators. But we serve on their boards, like many of us, and we make sure there's a deep connection. I meet with the heads of these incubators at least once a year to make sure there's a deep connection. And there's standing directive to my head of my entrepreneurship and innovation program that the success is measured by our companies or our students leaving and graduating from us to one of these incubators.
The role of institutions like UCSD, therefore, in the development of economic development of the communities in which they're embedded, is an important role to play. I mean, you talked about how you connect with entrepreneurship, but what is your thinking about what role should an institute, higher education institution, or university be playing in the economic development of the area and the region in which it's embedded?
I personally think it should be the main driver or one of the strong drivers of the local economy. I mean, look, UC San Diego, just to brag a little bit, like I said, we have a $1.5 billion research portfolio, top 5 in the country. We are a $6.5 billion institution with more than a $15 billion impact in the local economy. And the impact is partly because of the people we employ, about 30,000+ people. The impact is because of the companies we send out, the companies we create, the graduates we send out. So I think it is a holistic way of looking at it. And the university should be in the driver's seat and be driving a lot of these activities in the neighborhood. And by neighborhood, I mean broadly defined, large neighborhood.
Yeah. I think no discussion of higher education is complete without a conversation around the cost of higher education.
Right.
The new administration is trying to tackle the issue of student debt and finding a way to make college more affordable. We've had conversations and there've been public debates about whether public colleges should be free. So what's your sort of take on this overall picture around affordability and access and the problem of student debt, and how do we deal with these issues?
So let me see if I can do a little bit of arithmetic for you and explain to you. So we have to, in all of this, believe that higher education or a four-year degree is one of the main drivers and determinants of social mobility. We have to believe that, because without that, this conversation doesn't work. So if you believe that, then let's look at this country. The median income in this country, if I'm not mistaken, is about 65,000, something like that for a family of four. And let's look at the UC system. If you make less than 80,000 a year, you go to the UC system for free, no tuition, zero tuition, everything taken care of. But just living on campus or living costs, if you're not living at home, could be anywhere from around $15,000 to $20,000 a year. So if you now imagine for a family of four, which makes $65,000 or $70,000 to pay for this living cost, it doesn't make sense because they cannot afford it, right? So that basically tells you half the country cannot afford to send their kids to school, even when the tuition is free. So then we have to think about opportunities like work study, for example. Every institution should be expanding the work study program so that every student has a chance to make some money on campus doing meaningful work and therefore not taking out that loan. So you can add these programs, you can add scholarships, fellowships, grant money. And I think we should go towards, if not completely free four-year education, an education that is aimed at loan-free. And when you graduate, the likelihood of you being a loan-free, that you should have taken any loan should be very low. You should graduate without many loans. And I think public institutions are best set up to do this. Some very rich private institutions are set up to do this. But that's why we have to keep on investing in public institutions, and we have to keep on curbing and reducing the cost of education and managing it.
You've mentioned a couple of times that UCSD is at one of the top research and innovation institutions in the country and in the world, in fact. What advice would you have for higher education leaders who are looking to create a culture of innovation on their campuses?
So my advice would be that the last thing you should do is look at US News and World Report criteria and try to replicate what everybody else is doing and become part of the pack. I think you need to look at where you're situated, what's your location look like? What does your local population look like? What does the input look like in terms of students coming to you? And create a plan that is going to make these students successful. And if you do this correctly, you will make your community successful and you will make yourself successful.
Yes, thank you. Pradeep, it's been a pleasure talking to you and having this conversation. Just a last few questions from the audience before we wrap up over here. Got a question saying, how easy or difficult is it for institutions in other states to replicate the California model? And then can companies outside of California partner with UCSD?
So let me start with the second question. Anybody in this country or the world can partner with UC San Diego. And not only, and if you're outside the country, then we will make sure we follow all the laws of this country. And we are not breaking any laws in terms of tech transfer and sensitive technologies and so on and so forth. But yes, but we do have international partnerships and we will partner with anybody and everybody. Now, replicating the UC model, in my mind, is a function partly of resources and partly of great leadership. And I can tell you there are institutions in the country with good leaders who don't have the resources. And then there are other institutions who might have great resources, but not great leadership. So we need to find a match. But clearly the state has to start investing in their local institutions. Without that investment, without a belief in higher education, it is not going to work to recreate and replicate the University of California model.
Yeah, and I think that it is such a multi-layered model with several layers of institutions that is sort of a very unique way of putting together a higher education system in a state that's hard to replicate to other areas. But I think the one area where perhaps people can and other institutions can get an example of is how do you create top quality public institutions that are dedicated to both teaching and research, and also dedicated to inclusivity and access as well, which I think has been one of the hallmarks of the California model in particular. One last question, I think, before we wrap up, Pradeep. A lot of the focus, on technology as the focus of innovation in institutions in California. We look at the creation of Silicon Valley and the companies that are being spawned from the institutions. Talk to a little bit about, what is the other sorts of innovation that the campus focuses on that's not necessarily technology focused innovation, and how do you support activity both on campus that is entrepreneurial and innovative, but not necessarily focused on just science and technology?
So look, innovation, I think, is either technology focused or technology enabled, right? So for example, we have several programs, and we are actually the model in the country for this free medical delivery program where our MDs, our students, they've set up a free medical clinic like twice a week in downtown, where anybody and everybody can come to the clinic and get treated. Not only they set up the clinic, but they also have a lawyer at hand to help people with their domestic issues. They have an accountant at hand to help people with their financial issues, because there's a lot of people who we would call homeless, but they're not always extremely poor. I mean, they might not have a home, but they have marital problems, they have financial issues, they have dental issues in addition to medical issues. So we set up this all-in-one clinic, which is motivated by delivery of healthcare, but there are these wraparound services that individuals need that they usually don't have, and creates complexity in their life and other people's lives, right? So now I think this is a great innovation. It's not about technology, it's about behavior, it's about understanding the needs of the people. It's creating a process where we set it up. So you should go. So we set up this clinic in the basement of a church, where we set up an eye examination clinic without having all the complexity of an ophthalmologist's office or the complexity of a dentist's office, where we set up like dental care clinic, right? We cannot take these expensive technologies out there. So there's a lot of innovation that goes in building this. And I'm so excited. And this is an exemplar which is being replicated around the country based on what our students are doing.
Yes, that's a great example, I think, of the ways that universities can continue to support the local community in innovative ways, and be able to expand the notion of innovation beyond simply new technological developments and scientific progress as well. It's always a pleasure talking to you, Pradeep. Thank you so much for joining us. I know that I've learned a lot, and I'm sure the audience has as well. Good luck with the fall semester now coming up, and the full reopening of the campus. And we look forward to talking to you again at some point.
So thank you, sir. And let me just put in a plug for you. I think what you're doing in One Valley is of great interest and importance to the broader community, because not everybody has the resources to do it in-house. So I think what you're doing is offering a scalable example. And I want to work with you, and I hope other people also work with you and really propagate your gospel of entrepreneurship.
Thank you so much, Pradeep.
Thank you, sir. Bye.
Bye-bye. Over to you, Alec.
Yep. Thank you so much, Nikhil, for leading that incredible conversation. And Pradeep, we just can't thank you enough for the time today and the insight. There's no way to have a conversation about higher ed and entrepreneurship without really diving deep into the purpose of the university, its role in economic development in the public sphere. And it's great to hear from leadership, one of the great public university systems, and the vision to support entrepreneurship and innovation there. It's a perfect segue into our next session, which is, going from, the very, very kind of highest levels of the future of higher ed and the disruption and opportunities that we're seeing there into, on the ground, actually building next generation entrepreneurial programs for the innovators and entrepreneurs of today and tomorrow. And it's my pleasure to be able to moderate an exceptional panel of two entrepreneurial leaders inside the university setting. Kit Needham, who's the Assistant Dean of Entrepreneurship Initiatives at Carnegie Mellon University, and Chris Wolfel, the Director of the Rue Institute at Northeastern University. Kit, Chris, thank you so much for being here with us today. We really looking forward to this conversation, but I'd love maybe to kick this off if you'd share a little bit about your background and the programs that you run and how they fit into the entrepreneurial ecosystems of your respective universities. Kit, do you mind kicking us off?
Sure. I found out all my career I had been an entrepreneur, starting new things in usually larger corporations, and sort of got my start on startups when I was hired as the chief operating officer for Mellon Labs, which we were creating new businesses. Ended up here at CMU and was here at the beginning when we created Project Olympus. And we run the startup incubator programs. Earliest stage for students, faculty, staff, any school, any stage. As also alumni, we do high tech, low tech, no tech. We do lifestyle businesses. We do social enterprise. Our purpose, we say, is to, in a safe environment, learn how to start something. And the skills you learn will be great if you're doing a startup, even if you go into big corporations. So I've been here, the longest job I've ever been in any job since 2007. So we're about 15 years old.
No, it's incredibly exciting. Just so top of the funnel for one of the incredible entrepreneurial ecosystems, of the United States, and it's amazing to see what Project Olympus has accomplished over that history. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Institute and Northeastern's vision and approach to supporting entrepreneurship, both within and outside the university?
Yeah, and part of a little interesting piece of context for my background is I actually did my undergraduate at Northeastern. So I have a big Northeastern loop and helped be involved in a lot of the ecosystem that was developed on our main Boston campus. But joined the Institute about 9 months ago after starting 2 software companies. And ultimately the Rue Institute's mission, the Rue is about a 16-month-old institute for the university. It was launched on a bold vision by an entrepreneur and philanthropist, Dave and Barb Rue, who had a vision to catalyze economic development in the state of Maine through the connection of research, learning, and entrepreneurship, all wrapped in deep partnership with our corporate partners. So I lead our entrepreneurship pillar, which is focused on catalyzing economic development by either supporting the ecosystem, and we get into an interesting world where we don't just work with Northeastern student and faculty here. We also have an imperative that is economic development in the region. So we have programs all around the state. Then we have a people and talent program, as well as a venture creation acceleration program that houses our incubator and accelerator and a co-creation lab to launch new businesses from the ground up.
It's really interesting, and it's such a exciting vision for the role of an educational institution in supporting kind of the economic development of an entire state. And we just had Chancellor Khosla from UCSD here, kind of speaking about that vision and the opportunity for the university to really be a driver of not just its student bodies, entrepreneurial opportunities, but an entire region and an entire community. I'd love to kind of maybe start at the 30,000 foot level. And I think there's a lot of kind of different opinions about the role of universities and higher ed institutions in fostering innovation and entrepreneurship, of the full spectrum from, research and development and tech transfer to, regional economic development. And I'd love to just start with maybe your perspective on this question, this kind of very high level question of, what is the role of higher ed institutions in driving innovation and entrepreneurship? And, maybe Kit, I'd love to get your perspective on the question. And has that evolved, as you've spent more time working inside the university ecosystem?
So everybody remembers that, Pittsburgh was steel. And when that crashed, we were a single industry town pretty much. And so we were beginning the climb to recovery. And I had seen a report actually produced by an organization I work for. It's a nonprofit and economic development organization called the Allegheny Conference, that 64% of the net new jobs, come from startups and small businesses. And I thought, wow, why aren't we focused on that instead of trying to get big corporations to have a East Coast presence in Pittsburgh or international company to have a US presence? And that's when I started exploring that whole ecosystem. And when our founder got the grant to start Olympus, frankly, the university was, they were benign. It wasn't exciting. It was before entrepreneurship became a hot thing. But then over time, as we began to get traction, we were spinning out companies. We had some data that showed we were keeping people here in Pittsburgh, whereas everybody had been leaving to get jobs. And that eventually it became a huge factor in many students' decision to come to CMU. We were competing, we're all competing for the top students, and we were told that the fact that we had such a robust program made a difference. And then the school also found out it was as important to young faculty, the up and comers, that they were looking themselves to explore more, having more freedom and having a friendlier attitude toward entrepreneurship. And this is sort of how it evolved over time. So now everybody's for it.
It's interesting how that works, but
Yes.
it sounds like it's such a force multiplier of so many different elements of the university value chain. Chris, I'd love to get your perspective on this same question.
Yeah, I think a university is a perfect petri dish for all the pieces you need to really grow entrepreneurship, between the talent, the bouncing around of ideas, the development of IP, and then ultimately the safety and security of peers and experts you can tap into really easily. I think when you put all those pieces together, those elements I believe have always been there, but like Kit said, that wasn't traditionally the value prop, or things weren't positioned to support entrepreneurship. It was traditionally and always about how do we get our graduates into a job, not how do we get the graduates to create jobs. And I think right around the same time, Northeastern started their idea program in the 2007-ish timeframe, and it was the same thing. How do we give students, faculty, and alumni a safe way to learn and develop and test these ideas? And if it turns into a great company, that's phenomenal. If they learn the entrepreneurial thinking and skill set to make them more successful in their career, that's a win too. Because I've also now, while Kit has been with her program the whole time, I've been close, not fully involved, but always stayed close enough that I knew what was going on. And even watching the transition of someone that might have had something that didn't go as planned in the first years, then looking at where they're at 10 years later and knowing that experience played a part in the development of that entrepreneurial thinking, or the next kernel of an idea that became the business that was successful or made them successful in the role they went into.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, entrepreneurship is certainly one of those scenarios where, in one of those areas where it's so much more about the journey than the destination a lot of the time, and that skill set that you develop inside this kind of safe ecosystem is invaluable going forward. I think you spoke to some of the really interesting resources that exist inside the university setting that are valuable, or that are part of that petri dish of innovation. What, in your experience, have been kind of some of those consistent challenges that student entrepreneurs, faculty entrepreneurs face, and what have you seen is the opportunity for entrepreneurship programs in the university to provide support and provide infrastructure there? And maybe Chris, I'd love to direct this at you first.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges and things that the universities can be aware of is failure can be celebrated, in the entrepreneurship world, and there should be a percentage of things that do not work. There's going to be programs that don't work. There's going to be companies that don't work, but you need to be able to iterate and test on those and not just say, oh, this one program didn't work, let's throw it to the side and reallocate the time, headcount, and budget to another piece of, here, let's reallocate that to a certain division that we know has been the same for the last 50 years. I think that ability and the kind of culture of embracing taking big chances that may or may not go. Obviously, you want to mitigate the risks in every way you can, but give the entrepreneurship organizations, support organizations, faculty and team that ability to fail. And it's not only just the concepts, sometimes it's the programs. I've seen programs at universities that are phenomenal in concept. They hit the ground running and something goes sideways for an X, Y, or Z reason. And then the next day they're like, oh yeah, that whole team's no longer working on that. We've now moved them to exec ed. That's not going to be the way to really support an entrepreneurial ecosystem, because both sides need the ability to experiment, test, and learn. So I think embracing that culture of learning, not necessarily failing, and then making the next version better is something that every institution, and probably corporate, right? I work with a lot of corporate partners as well. And it's the same thing there when they're trying to think through their innovation ecosystems. You need to be comfortable with that risk.
It's hard to support entrepreneurship if you're not willing to be entrepreneurial. It sounds pretty fair. Kit, I love your perspective, because you see such a broad, portfolio and diversity of, entrepreneurs from, to your point, low tech, no tech, the most advanced robotics you could ever possibly imagine. What are some of those common challenges that you look through Project Olympus to help entrepreneurs face, and what's the type of support that you provide to make that entrepreneurial journey easier?
So the two biggest challenges when we were setting this up, I did a lot of research from that which already existed in some of the other universities. We obviously were not the first. And the first big challenge is how to come up with programs that are what I call curriculum friendly. I talked to somebody who ran a program in one of the Ivies. And so I said, how do you set these things up? They had a very competitive type of incubator program that only a few were taken in, and then they had a rigorous program. I said, how do you do that without conflicting with classes? And she said, oh no, we expect them to cut. If they don't care enough about their business that they are willing to cut classes, then they don't belong on our program. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll get fired if I set something up like that, because parents are paying a lot of money for this education. So something that was curriculum friendly. And the second thing is, I said, what did you do with all these people who applied that couldn't get in? She said, oh, they can apply next time. And so Lenore, the founder, and I, we decided we were going to set the lowest possible bar to participating and doing, I call it the toe dip. And then hopefully you'll wade in deeper. And it's a one-page application, simple to fill out. And if you're not sure what your revenue model, it's okay to say not sure. If you had all the answers, you wouldn't need us. You submit it, you meet with me now, or it could be one of our EIRs. You're in the program for life, as long as you want to work on it. And we said, again, as I said, high tech, low tech. It is CMU, so we tend to have mostly high tech, but we don't exclude it. Because it's like Chris said, we're economic development, and somebody who's running a brewery is still hiring people and making money and paying taxes. So those are the two biggest challenges. And so what we end up coming with sort of a toolkit of all different things. We have these things called Connects, free and open to everyone. Nowadays, we're taping them all. So if you miss it, it's on every subject possible. We have a startup law series that we do with lawyers in town. We have set up a whole mentor office hour expert section that people can then just go to sort of self-help to reach out and get contacts and pulling in the community. So it was there was no one size fits all. And then we had to have some opportunities though for cohorts, because data has shown the best advice you get is from other CEOs, usually of companies that are like 6 months or a year ahead of you, because they just recently have been through that. And so if you're coming in one-on-one, you have a mentor, EIR that works with you as long as you're willing to work on it. But you still needed to have access to the CO. So we have programs to do that as well.
No, it's a great set of resources to just decrease the friction of exploring entrepreneurship and working on a venture. And I loved the reference to how do you make it easy to dip your toe in the water, and I think it segues really well into my next question, which is for most students and most entrepreneurs, actually just the university is their first introduction to kind of structured entrepreneurial ecosystems and what it really might mean to start a business. And so how do you think about or how do you think institutions can do a better job of inspiring that next generation of students to look at entrepreneurship and kind of channel that student's energy into entrepreneurial opportunities? And maybe Kit, I'd love to keep going with you.
Okay, so some of the things that we've learned over time is that we making room for entrepreneurship courses and then having a part of sort of the package of stuff that you have to take at least one. But it's also one size does not fit all. So you have like financing and startups, and you have marketing and sales and startups. The other thing we started doing, Tepper School of Business had actually had a head start in the entrepreneurial thing. For their MBA track, way before Entrepreneur School, you could in your second year specialize in entrepreneurship. But it was only, everything they had was only open to Tepper. So that has now changed. And so any student from any school, as long as they're in there's space in there too, can apply. We do a lot of crossover. And we actually find having the engineering, the business, and the designer students all in the same class actually leads to sort of better team creation. So specializing, we do sometimes specializing in if you're doing mobile services versus robotic startups, because they're really different. So it's diversity and the ability, it's easy for students to sign up.
I also feel like just looking at, in the time I've spent getting to know the CMU ecosystem, you've done an exceptional job of raising awareness of all these different programs and opportunities through venture fairs and student business plan competitions. And how have you found that, for lack of a better word, kind of PR strategy of getting the word out of the work that you're doing?
To be honest, it's mixed. We have some schools and people that are all over this, and then we have others, the alumni come in when they're here for a homecoming or whatever, and they said, gee, I wish these resources had been here when I was in school. And I said, when did you graduate? This is 2017. I said, we've been around for 10 years before that, and they wish they had known it. So I just say, I think we do a great job. I don't think we do a great job of talking about ourselves enough, but what we're doing now is we're getting more. We've had now, as of this morning, 13 exits. And so every time we get one of those, we kind of promote that. And so it's not us, it's the results that are showing. But to Chris's point, the thing that I love, we have the same philosophy. Whatever skills you learn on this, even if the startup doesn't work, it's still going to help you in your big corporate job, knowing how to innovate and look for new opportunities. And so when our alum have become some of our biggest advocates for this. So better PR coming from them, because they said, this is what I learned, and I would not have gotten this job, or I would not have been able to do X and Y if I hadn't learned this. And he said, and all of it was not in the classroom. So I think that's good PR.
No, makes sense. Chris, the RU Institute is such a new model and such kind of a different way of thinking about establishing this programming. How do you think about kind of embedding entrepreneurship in the student life and inspiring entrepreneurship?
Yeah, and part of this is as a 16 or so month old piece of the university. I've been here for 9 months. Our teams, if this was last March, there were 3 full-time staff in the entire institute, not just anything. So we are learning this as we basically building this as we fly, as our own startup in a way. And one of the things that we are working on really closely here is we also are only doing graduate and advanced degrees. So we don't have any undergraduates on our campus. So that brings a lot of benefits, but also challenges and interesting opportunities. So we actually have right now co-located on our campus, not only, and we only have one floor of one building for everything. Our classrooms are on the same floor as where our Techstars accelerator is going to sit, which is across from where our incubator is, which is where our corporate partners sit and our staff. So actually having all of these people in a single location and integrating that directly into coursework. So our one of the professors who teaches our computer vision course can walk across the building or at lunch run into one of our companies that's using computer vision to map floodplains off of building permits and say, hey, that's really interesting. Can I actually use that in my course? And getting to the point that it's really applied learning and getting the exposure in a way that feels organic, but also engaging. And it makes it kind of how Kit mentioned, dip your toe in. You know, if someone's doing a master's degree just to level up in their career, just that additional exposure, but those that are really excited and interested in, hey, maybe I want to start something one day, can come to the events, or it just makes it a frictionless way to actually start having those conversations. So we have a couple other things that we're going to try to build out over the next few months as we scale and build here. But then also when I think back to our Boston campus, I think a really fascinating thing, similar to kind of what Tepper did, but the dean of our business school has done a phenomenal job working with the other deans to have entrepreneurship electives that are basically cross universities so that you can give people access early on just to have that folded into coursework. So I think that's something that all universities should figure out is like, how do you make that? I mean, if I had my way, I'd make it required at everywhere that everyone took an entrepreneurship kind of 101 venture creation course, but at least make it available to everyone as early in the process and celebrating the wins and showing the pathways. And whether that's for an undergrad, a postdoc, or research, just showing them and celebrating the wins, because I think, Kit, I've heard that same story. We had the same thing where, you know, the alumni, oh, where was this? And you're like, we've been doing it for a while on that campus. So the better you can celebrate the wins and continually get the word out, I don't know if anyone I've seen has done it perfectly. That's going to always be a challenge because there's so much happening on a university campus.
I just, if I can, I want to amplify one thing Chris said, because he touched on is corporate partnerships, that having industry involved so that you're solving a real problem, and that engaging them sort of early on, which sort of can lead the direction. And it's almost like a reference customer, somebody could help you think and tie you into the ecosystem. That is so smart. And you did it from the beginning. We built it up over time, but it did not exist when we first started.
Yeah, and we have taken that kind of entrepreneurial principle to everything. So we actually had 10 corporate partners before we had a single student enrolled at the Institute that helped us design what are the types of courses, and then even when we started to stand up the entrepreneurship program, our thesis areas align very much with the company's needs and interests here, which make it even more valuable to those companies. So I think it's smart corporate partnerships, because it's really easy to say we're doing the corporate partnership, which is here's the 50 companies that give free services to startups, which are needed, right? Those are great things for the startups. But what are the things in the areas that you're going to really bet on and the partners that can help those companies be successful?
No, makes a lot of sense. I think it's going to be so exciting to see the outcomes of the Rue Institute over the coming years. Is really a case study on what happens when you just put unbelievable focus on, you know, entrepreneurial skill development and venture creation. And I think it'll be an exciting and a very exciting outcome. And you know, these emerging models of enterprise first and kind of partner first innovation are certainly, you know, incredibly relevant in today's you know, increasingly, you know, fast, in a world of increasingly fast-paced innovation where everyone's kind of trying to figure out what that you know, unfair advantage is, and where they get that access to talent. You know, one thing I'd like to go back to, you know, Kit, is you were talking about some of the resources that you provide to CMU students, and some of the kind of speaker and event series you've created, the you know, mentorship and office hours resources you've created, and then also the cohort-based programs. How do you think about finding the right balance of kind of structured versus on-demand resources? And, what's the right mix for, an undergrad entrepreneurship program?
Well, first of all, we're undergrad, we are masters, we are PhDs. So I want to say that I've been talking mostly about what I call the student population, and I'll talk later about the faculty sort of as our next focus. But the one size doesn't fit all. You just need to have a mix. And as Chris said, it's a little bit of, I don't want to say trial and error. So we have the connects, and is it better to have it at 5 o'clock at night, or is it better to have it over lunchtime? And so we tried them both and kind of figure out, and then realized that one size does not fit all. And so when we started taping them and making them available. By the way, we're part of, now it's a larger unit called the Schwartz Center. But when we started out, we were sort of standalone, and then the center that was over in the Tepper School began to grow and invite others in too. And so eventually they just put an umbrella over us and called it the center. And when Jim Schwartz gave us some money, we named it after him. So, I can't say other than try a lot of different things and because you do need to have the cohort thing. We're part of the NSFI core site program, and we have this thing called Innovation Fellows, which is a cohort. It is competitive to get in, but we have then something for everyone. So anybody can come at any time with any type of idea, and that we host, well, used to in the summer, we would have pure pitch and pizza, buy food, students show up. And we would invite various ones to give 5-minute pitches about what they're doing, working on that summer. So everybody sort of knew who was doing what, and they offered each other help. So kind of creating the cohort during the summer in our accelerator space or incubator space.
No, makes sense. And again, that community is just such a valuable asset if you can really create it. Maybe I'd love to change the conversation to a slightly different direction, maybe a bit more tactical. Is, how do you think about defining success and establishing kind of KPIs and goals for entrepreneurial initiatives? Because I think as Chris mentioned, there's this tendency to launch something. Sometimes it doesn't behave exactly how you anticipated it might behave, and you need to pivot or change. And how do you create metrics and KPIs that allow you to be successful in that kind of unpredictable environment of supporting entrepreneurship? Chris, maybe you want to kick us off there?
Well, if you ask me this in a year, I'll hopefully have a better answer. Because my first year kind of goals and KPIs was like figure out a strategy. We really launched our first set of programs in January. I kind of look at there's a high level cultural change and transformation, right? So I think some of the stuff that we're working on is how do we change the culture and awareness. And this is if you're in a CPG world, you do a brand lift study or something to figure out, okay, did we really change perception? But we're not going to hire Nielsen for a university study. But how do we transform the way the university, both faculty, staff, and students look at the entrepreneurial pathways? And I think a lot of that is through organizing things in a streamlined way. I think it's great to hear kind of how, Kit has her program that then sits as part of a larger ecosystem. A lot of universities that gets very siloed and causes a lot of issues, and that then creates rifts. And so how do you create an aligned culture on growing the entrepreneurial ecosystem, either for the university, for the region you're in, and growing that pie and showing the pathways, right? Not everyone that goes through a PhD program is going to become a professor. Not everyone that goes through a master's program is going to just join a management consulting. Like, they're not going to just do the traditional. There's always going to be the percent that if they see the pathway. So it's not a great scientific number there, but it's like lives touched, right? How many unique people participated in one of those programs or events as just a first, and then the value of that measured by how many people are repeat. So we track who's came to all of our events, And who came once, who came 5 times, who came 10 plus times is like the structure we're trying to build out of like, hey, here's the startup curious person to the committed in that spectrum. And then when you get into the portfolio, like that's overall, but when you're looking at a specific program, right, where we have an incubator program, we focus on the number of jobs created, the growth in their revenue. I think, funds raised is always the thing everyone likes to default to, which is easy. It's not always the best measure. And I would say most time it's not the best measure. It's a good metric, but it's not all inclusive. So that's why we also look at revenue growth, jobs created, things along those lines. So I would kind of say there's those 2 different pathways to look at, and whether you're looking at the impact on people in society or the impact on your companies. And those have to be looked at as different metrics, because if you try to slam them together, it'll end up being a bit of a mess. But I'm going to now take furious notes while Kit talks about KPIs and goals, because she's been doing this longer than I have.
And that's what I was going to say is I'd love to now hear kind of the other side of the coin, which is with a program that's got 15 years of history. How do you think about your KPIs and your goals?
Okay, so at some point, just having come from a corporate background in there, we do initially quarterly, now 3 times a year at the end of each of the semesters, fall, spring, and summer, called by the numbers. And so decided not to track outputs. We were trying to track outcomes. And so we would see, for example, like Chris said, every time you submitted an application, how many people are on the team, what schools did they come from, were they undergrad versus master's, PhDs, to just try to see what the mix was, because inevitably a dean would ask me because they wanted to put it in some material. We did do measured the best we can revenue raised. We keep track of the number of companies formed, which I think is a bad metric, in that any idiot pays $125 for the company. There's no challenge there, but it's part of the autumn data that you're required to submit. We have fair number of international students. We see do not form this company until after you've graduated and you're going to get the proper visa status. We do track the number of accelerator programs they get in and the number of awards they've won, whether they've gotten SBIRs. So there is a little bit of a measure, not that we think they're great, but somebody else thinks they're worthy of some sort of investment. And we don't have the resources to do what Chris is talking about. I just wish we could. I've done some anecdotal surveys, for example, locally as part of the economic development. Like I went out to the founders at the time, how many of you were from Pittsburgh? And only one of all these founders who responded was from Pittsburgh. I said, how many of you would have stayed in Pittsburgh if you hadn't started your business here? And only one, not the one from Pittsburgh, but he married a local girl and they were starting a family. And so there's an old saying that, they always come back. And how many employees did you have? And at the time, this was early on, it was like over 400. So they're creating jobs and they're hiring their colleagues from Pitt, they're hiring their colleagues from Duquesne, from other local universities, as well as CMU. So we were like a little economic development agency. But after they move out and on, it's really hard for us to keep track. Because sometimes they shut down whatever they were working on before, but then they start on something new, or they change their name. So
and their email and don't tell you.
Email and everything else too. So what he said is what you should be doing. It does take a lot of work. And I know at UNC, I think they have 2 people who do full-time, nothing but those metrics. There are only 3 of us. So we're running these programs. So I don't have the resources. But ultimately, we do track exits. And as I said this morning, we learned about 13th. So.
Congratulations on the 13th. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Chris, we only have a couple minutes left, but I wanted to throw something particularly in your direction. It was really exciting to see the announcement regarding the new program between the Rue Institute and Techstars Accelerator. Can you tell us a little bit more about that program and what caused you to pursue Techstars as a partner and launch this kind of collaborative program?
Yeah, so when I took this role, I spent a few months actually working around the entire ecosystem, both Northeastern and the state of Maine, and did about 150 discovery interviews on what's here, what's working, what's not. And one of the pieces that we started to see was to attract kind of the top tier investor eyes. And again, a lot of this kind of was starting to be done pre-COVID or early COVID. So it was still in the point when investors were not yet comfortable, making investment decisions via Zoom meetings. I think we have a massive opportunity coming out of the other side of this. I think same in Pittsburgh, right? The non-top tier cities have the non-traditional top tier tech cities have huge potential to move companies to places they want to live, not necessarily where they feel like they've had to live. So when we started looking at this, we said, okay, we need a partner that also can help put Portland on the global scale, because there was a lot of things happening here we knew about, but very quiet, very small. And we went out and worked and talked to probably 15 or 20 different potential partners, and both the alignment in kind of pedagogy, their way they go about things, the way that we thought they would fit in Portland, the alignments, and all of that fit. And for us, it was a piece of the puzzle when we looked at all the things we needed to do to help catalyze entrepreneurship here around the community, partnering with organizations. We're creating fellowships and innovation associate programs to move young talent. When we got into the accelerator incubator space, we have a great, phenomenal accelerator program on the Boston campus that is really blends the line more between an incubator accelerator. It's just like how Kit mentioned, we let everyone into the first stage of that program. But in order to run a highly competitive global program that's open to anyone in the world, that wasn't our sweet spot, right? We're an academic institution. So we wanted to bring a partner in that had the expertise and skill. And then they're embedded here too. So, right, two kind of offices over is where Lars, our MD, is going to be sitting, and their companies will sit directly in here. And we wanted to put something in that also was a bit unexpected, right? Our approach has been, how do we reinvent the way a higher education institution supports entrepreneurs? Because we have this once in a lifetime opportunity to build our institute from scratch using the resources of a 100-year-old R1 university that has 11 campuses around the world. So I can actually pull, hey, here's the best program we run in Boston or on our San Francisco campus, or here's a faculty member from our London campus, and pull them in to Portland. And in the way the world's moving, entrepreneurship happens everywhere. And historically, it's been, okay, there's the 5 cities in the US and the 10 globally. If you want to build a massive tech company, you most likely have to be in. Those are starting to change, and those trends, I think, have just been accelerated post-COVID. And the way that universities can play into that is supporting the areas they're in by pulling some of these partnerships in. So that was kind of the piece we brought in. We're really excited. The applications closed for that program a few weeks ago, and we're in the process of reviewing. The first cohort will run this fall, so September to December. Anyone that wants to come out to Portland in December for demo day, send me an email. I'll get you on the list. Kit will have you come up and have lobster rolls in the snow, but it's a great place to be.
That's quite a pitch, but congratulations on the launch or the close of the applications and the pending launch of the accelerator program. It's a really kind of innovative and exciting way to approach the opportunity. We're running out of time here, so I want to kind of put a final question to both of you, which is, it's very kind of broad, but what's something that you wish you knew when you started building out entrepreneurial ecosystems, and what has been one of your most impactful learnings? Kit, for you over quite some time, and Chris, for you as you dove headfirst into creating this institute. Maybe Kit would love to hear your perspective.
Who do you want to start?
Kit, if you'll kick us off.
Okay. So the thing I think over time that, although I knew about it, I didn't know enough about it, probably was doing custom discovery and doing it the correct way. If people do it at all, they don't do it right. And particularly my engineers, love them, but they want to start building right away. And until you know the market, make sure you're solving the right problem. And then you can go say, well, am I solving it the right way? But now that we have a very much modeled after the National Science Foundation, very insistent upon doing that market research. And I will just tell you, every team that I have worked with since we've sort of perfected the model that has done it the right way, 100% end up doing something different. And isn't that so much better to know right in the beginning before you have spent all the time, your money, somebody else's money? It's wasted. Every pivot I see is, I thought, did you really do your homework? So that is probably the number one lesson I would say. And this is just a small thing, but for universities who are either starting this now or some choice, we did a poll once of my counterparts at some event, and somebody asked, where does everybody report? Where are you structured? And what they found out, those who were happiest were actually under the NM, the administration, not in an individual school. Unless it's restricted only to that school, which I don't think is best practices considered on most campuses. So we started out in sort of the Tepper School of Computer Science, and now we're reporting to the VP of Research, which just sort of gets away from why are we spending all this time and money on everybody else? So.
That's great. And Chris, what do you wish you knew 10 months ago?
I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I'm just going to continually say, and this is what I say to every company, university, when I say like, oh, how do we get involved in entrepreneurship? It is a long game. If you are looking to see immediate tomorrow ROI, don't get involved. You need to put the entrepreneur first and trust that that is going to be what comes back, right? This is very much a put the entrepreneur first, and you have to have confidence in the team and the students and faculty that are starting these companies, that if you provide strong support, that's going to come back in a way that supports the university or the institution or whatever entity in a way that provides ROI. If you're saying, you know, I'm looking to make sure that this first $5 turns into 20, it's not going to be something you're going to see fast in the entrepreneurship world, and you set everyone up for failure with that. Granted, it's okay to look at the long-term ROI, but you need a long time. And I think, you know, one of the first events Dave Rue had with our team here is he said, I want to remind everyone overestimates what they can do in a year and underestimates what they can do in 10. And I think if you take the 10-year horizon on these things, you look at Kit's program that now has 13 exits. My assumption is the majority of those came in the last 5 years, not in the first 10. And maybe some in year 7 or 8, but like when you look at the stages of companies that universities are working with, not angel investors look at 7 to 10 year horizons, and universities are before that, right? So you've got to look at the right time horizon and make sure you're putting the entrepreneur first, and that's going to be uncomfortable in some situations, right? So that's kind of my push, and I'll keep pushing it as long as I can.
Oh no, it's great perspective, and it's certainly great advice, both for anyone who's starting entrepreneurial programs and for, you know, university leaders and administrators that are thinking about supporting them. And so, you know, Kit and Chris, I cannot thank you enough for spending the time with us today. I feel like we got into so many great topics and conversations in this time. So again, thank you for taking some time out of building, you know, a couple of the world's premier academic entrepreneurial ecosystems to share some of these perspectives and insights with us.
So I just want to reach out to anybody who's on this. If you have any follow-up questions, or if I can send you something, it's just kit@cmu.edu. So all 3 letters. Feel free to reach out. Happy to respond.
And same here, and mine's just c.wolfel@northeastern.edu.
Keeping it easy with an open door. Thank you both so much for being generous with your time.
Okay. Well, thanks for inviting
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks to our audience for continuing to tune in. We're now transitioning to our next session. And we have a very exciting panel from our partners at AWS Edstart. Our next panel is brought to you by AWS Edstart, which is a program designed to help entrepreneurs build the next generation of online learning, analytics, and campus management solutions on the AWS cloud. The accelerator is designed to enable EdTech startups to move faster with benefits such as equity-free financial support through AWS's promotional credits, as well as technical training and support, access to a global community of EdTech experts, and many other incredibly valuable resources. Here's a brief video explaining a bit more about the AWS Edstart program.
The rapid pace of technology innovation is changing the education industry. Entrepreneurs are pushing the boundaries and creating innovative solutions for students, teachers, and educational establishments. AWS Edstart, Amazon Web Services Education Technology Accelerator, is designed to help you build in a secure, scalable, and cost-effective way, allowing you to focus on creating the next generation of online learning, analytics, and campus management solutions. From design to global scale, AWS Edstart offers resources to quickly develop your applications on the AWS cloud. AWS Edstart offers 2 program levels. First, the AWS Edstart Innovators tier, which is designed to support the earliest stage EdTech startups with entry-level support and access to virtual and live events. Innovators are granted AWS promotional credits that allow them to explore AWS technology and build the foundation for their solution. Second, the AWS Edstart Members tier is designed to help EdTech entrepreneurs build and scale solutions on the AWS cloud. Members of AWS Edstart are provided with resources such as select marketing opportunities, technical training, and mentorship, along with exposure to a global community of EdTech builders, leaders, and fellow entrepreneurs. To get started with AWS Edstart, visit aws.amazon.com/AWS Edstart to learn more and submit your application.
It's my pleasure to introduce Grace Ann De Cesaris, the Global Business Development Lead at AWS Edstart, as the moderator of the next session, Trends in EdTech and Entrepreneurship. Please, Grace Ann, take it away.
Thank you, Alec, and thanks again to One Valley for hosting this event and giving us an opportunity to talk to you about EdTech and AWS Edstart. As mentioned, I'm the Global Business Development Manager for AWS Edstart, Amazon Web Services virtual and equity-free accelerator for education technology startup companies. I have a passion for helping people who have a mission to solve problems in education. And in my role at AWS, I get to work with entrepreneurs, investors, and technologists who we spend our days aiming to transform education. As mentioned in both the video and Alec had mentioned, we help founders and EdTech startups around the world accelerate their business growth by providing them with benefits such as equity-free financial support through AWS promotional credit, technical training, and also access to our global community of EdTech experts. We provide resources for our founders, such as today's event, hosted by top industry experts, investors, and accelerators, and top research institutions around the world. We're going to spend the next 30 minutes or so hearing from our panelists, and we'll try to provide some time for Q&A. But if we don't get to your questions, we'll try to answer them offline. With that said, I'm honored to be joined by AWS Edstart members and leaders on our panel today and female founders of Royales, Class to Class, and Evermore. Please meet Mukami, Maddie, and Ivy. Ladies, if you want to turn your video and sound on. With that, I just would like for each of you to spend the next few minutes talking a little bit about yourselves, your company, and your company's mission, and maybe just mention the segment of the population that you're serving. And I'll start off with you, Ivy.
Hello, everybody. So nice to be here, and thanks, Grace Ann. My name is Ivy Machao. I'm the founder and CEO of Evermore. Evermore is a social learning companion to help Gen Zs deal with life skillfully. The segment that we serve consists of Gen Zs, of course, but also very much 15 to 25-year-old transitional age young people. They're the most vulnerable population, especially post-COVID. So we all know that we don't learn by content, we learn socially and emotionally, and that's what Evermore is for. I live and breathe the psychology of learning, so it's amazing to be here.
Yeah. Maddie?
Hello, I'm Maddie Piffard, and I'm co-founder and head of product at Class to Class. And we've created a collaborative learning network that helps universities create virtually collaborative courses, projects, and internships with other universities, NGOs, and businesses around the world. Our goal is to give every student the opportunity and access to meet with other students across the globe, get to know them, even if they can't afford to go on study abroad, and to reach out or to work with businesses on projects, because that's not easily accessible to everyone, and we believe that it should be.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Mukami.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Mokami Kinoti Kimotho, CEO and Chief Girl Crusader at Royals. We are the first company built for girls with a specific focus on igniting this next generation of trailblazers and change makers and ceiling smashers in STEAM. Our gamified learning adventures intersect AR, AI, and voice technologies with storytelling and inclusive role modeling. So our initial product, which is currently in private beta, is a mobile app-based learning adventure platform for 6 to 10-year-olds, anchored in fierce female avatars and real-life superheroes in science, tech, engineering, the arts, and math. We've been in private beta the past 3 months and just launched for iOS in the App Store, and are beginning to onboard our first round of public beta waitlisters right now. So it's an honor to be a part of AWS Innovators, the Innovator Accelerator, and looking forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mukami. So my first question, Ivy, I'm going to start with you again. As an EdTech founder, what are some of the trends you're seeing in EdTech?
Yeah, I think this trend, I have 3 that I want to add. They're very high level. The one trend that we actually have been seeing even pre-COVID, but now accelerated by COVID, is actually asynchronous learning, right? It basically means that you get to learn when you want to learn, whether or not the lessons being given within a set time or a set structure. And that has been super conducive for the 2 next trends. The other is intentional learning. Again, this is about not so much curriculum-based learning, it's more project-based. It's based on the person's own inclinations, and it's set on intention, and it's structured towards a goal and fostered by actual activity, like the actual doing, and feedback. And I think the next one is multimodal. And the rest of the innovators on the panel, we can all speak to this, because we know that, yes, it's social, emotional, and it's also voice, it's also VR, it's also gaming. So there are so many different opportunities based on these trends, and I'm excited to hear what the rest of you guys have to add.
Yeah, I absolutely am. I absolutely agree with Ivy's assessment of the trends. One of the biggest trends that I see in EdTech is very linked, this idea of gamified learning, particularly in these global pandemic times. Virtual and social distance learning has presented significant challenges, not just for educators, but for learners alike. And gamification of those experiences is proving to help us overcome many of the hurdles and obstacles that we're facing. And more we're seeing the adoption of game-based learning and gamified instruction as the impactful approach to helping learners make those meaningful connections, build community, supporting the self-direction that is necessary in these virtual learning environments. Motivation as well. Learning is also sparking and supporting a lot of creative expression and ideation, and even encouraging collaborative problem solving and solutioning, even within the isolation that we're all experiencing. And I really think that some of the immersive technologies out there, like the AR and the AI and voice, et cetera, are powering these experiences.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, student engagement right now is like so critical, because we are so separated as we've been virtual the past year, and learning in that way has just been something we need to figure out, how to bring tools to the classroom that help connect people even beyond this and really apply a lot of 21st century skills. And through project-based learning, like you mentioned, Ivy, I think that's absolutely critical.
And Maddie, it sounds like the trends that we were just talking about really align to the work that you're doing. What are the missions or problems that you're trying to solve?
Right.
What inspired it?
Yeah. Okay. So part of our focus is helping universities build partnerships so that students from across the globe can really benefit from those partnerships and who they can work with through them, and really learn 21st century skills, network, stay engaged, and apply their learning in real world situations. Because as we've gone more remote this past year, we've really been able to see how we can connect globally in the workforce from anywhere, and being able to do that and practice that is crucial as we leave school and go into the workforce. Being able to work with people from different cultures, being able to communicate and do projects with someone that you're not going to see in the library at school. Like, that's our real life now. And being able to practice that's what our mission really is to facilitate those collaborations and to help people polish those skills before they're dropped into this very different world that we're going to be emerging into. So, yeah.
That's awesome. And I know that really the trends align to the work that you're doing as well, McCarry. Would you want to add anything to that about your inspiration?
For sure. When we think about the fact that kids as young as 2 years old these days are spending upwards of 6 hours a day on their smartphones and their tablets, and I believe the number is like 75 to 90% of these kids play video games, with virtual learning during the pandemic having sort of accelerated and escalated those numbers, it's pretty clear that from my vantage point, mobile gaming is quite literally now the heart of where our kids are interacting and being entertained and learning. That coupled with the fact that middle school girls in particular have an interest in STEM that plummets as they reach high school, even though this is sort of the most lucrative opportunities and impactful careers are in STEM fields. It's a huge problem. And moms like me, frankly, all parents, educators, et cetera, are demanding more from the gaming experiences, the mobile-driven play experiences that are out there, particularly for our girls who are disproportionately impacted by limiting views of what is possible for them in science, in tech, in engineering, in math, et cetera. So that's sort of what is driving us from a Royals perspective, this opportunity to unlock 21st century girls' full potential through gamified learning and to open that window to all that is possible for them in meaningful life paths like ours.
Yeah, that really leads into my next question. Just talk to me a little bit about how the technology, and I'll leave this up to any of you to answer, but talk to me a little bit about how the technology is trending. And as a founder, like, how do you differentiate between the technology that's trending and what's actually critical to implement?
I can jump in there. So given that Evermore is a voice-based technology, and we all know that we keep on hearing learning loss in higher ed, especially, right? But really learning in general, because of the isolation, like you guys touched on, and because of sort of this loss of confidence, machine learning has a huge role to play here in aspects of not just helping with student engagement per se, or really trying to crunch the numbers on academic achievements. It really goes beyond that now, right? So I think one trend is, how does machine learning and artificial intelligence actually extend to understanding student engagement? But EdTech now is more than education because of this machine learning context. It means that now we can actually pay off on student or learner-centered insights and analytics. Learning is very much psychological. It's cultural, like McCarry based on, mentioned. And it's also very full modal. So the embodiment of learning, how we can start to kind of looking at the entire learner, entire person, and understand that, when you don't have great mental health, you're probably also not learning optimally. And executing on that is very important, right? So I think Grace Ann, you touched on this. It's, trends, but what is the right way to seize the opportunity and actually implement it in a way that's not just because it's trendy, but it's beneficial. So I think, there's a lot of great learnings for us to revisit in the school of thoughts that is social emotional learning, the science of empathy, and inclusive learning. But it's down to sort of the innovators in the space and the companies who are creating EdTech to make sure that we're actually measuring the right things to be using those technologies efficiently.
I love that. I would like to open this up to all of you again, and I'll start with you, Maddie. As an EdTech founder, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome?
I think for us, our biggest challenge in like the EdTech space specifically, I guess, can go down to just the fact that a lot of the class or instructors aren't always very excited to add a new tech tool to their classroom. It's like, cool, another thing I have to learn. And wanting, because what we've brought is a space where you can plug in the different LMSs you use, different tools you use to collaborate, because even on the same campus, Blackboard, for one, department doesn't always, or instructor course doesn't always work collaboratively with a course just across on the same campus. So we are trying to create a space where those things can work together, like with different LMSs, different tools. So trying to convince them that it's not an entire new tool to have to learn and use, and it might not stick. Like there's a lot of pushback and skepticism, which is very understandable given the fact that there's always a ton of tools coming their way. And they're like, I'm just trying to teach my students the best way I know how. And and so that's, I think, one of our biggest hurdles. And I see nodding. So I'm assuming you guys have experienced the same, Kami and Ivy.
Absolutely. Maddie, you're spot on. I'm thinking about it in the context too of us as female founders, and some of the challenges that we experience. The biggest one by far being access to things like the social, technical, and financial capital that we all need to grow and scale our businesses. Frankly, it's a tough slog for any entrepreneur, but nearly an impossible proposition for female founders in technology, particularly ones that are solo founders as well. I think that, it's not enough to build incredible solutions that solve very real problems that are affecting billions of people across the globe. We need to power our go-to-market strategies through partnerships and with corporates and mission-aligned organizations. We need to broaden our teams. We need to grow and scale the business. We need the successes that we experience on an ongoing basis to be amplified in spaces where it counts, and so that those hurdles that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis become lower and the obstacles become fewer, and our odds for success in the long term grow. What do you think, Ivy?
I think that's, it's, again, spot on. It's all about relationships, if we think about it at the end of the day, right? And sometimes you just don't have the right access to the right relationships for you to build them, which is why it's really good, Mukami and Maddie and Grace Ann, this is not the first time we've been in the same room. We've been in other shared rooms before, because of Edstart. It's constantly giving me and us these opportunities. And I think that's where technology really comes in, especially during the pandemic. We can't just show up to the same event and share the same podium. So I think this idea of, where it can basically go from, traditionally in startups and in competitions and accelerator programmings, usually you have this idea of a demo day, right? You go through a programming of X number, a length of time, and you kind of culminate at this point of you go on the stage and you kind of show off what you have built. That is not, it's great for having a competing spirit and giving structure to have efforts and work putting to something that can, I guess, manifest itself in due time. but the relationship aspect is lost, right? So I'm seeing more sort of, it's great to kind of move away from that model of a single demo day to something that's more about fostering the relationships that sits evergreen on the platform. So it also empowers founders like us to say, well, it's not so much about being picked, it's about choosing the right conversations that you will want to have as well. It goes both ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great, Ivy. And you actually just touched on what my next question was really based about, because of the pandemic, right? Things have changed. And that's one thing that has changed, is like building relationships is a little different, right? No longer are you going to a demo day and meeting everybody in that room and then creating that relationship. So can you talk to me a little bit about what are some of the other bigger shifts you've seen in education and the support and funding since the pandemic?
Yeah, platform-based starting. So it goes actually through an entire life cycle, from a company or an innovator submitting an idea or a company, to assessment, to evaluation, to essentially matchmaking of, matching with the investors with, that has synergistic thesis to what you're building, and actually funding cycle and funding amount. A lot of those are becoming more transparent, and in a way, just having it on a single platform means that you will have a Q&A page to go to when you have questions, and you won't necessarily feel like you have to raise your hand and ask, let's just say, a dumb question, right? And I think that accessibility of being able to have these easy conversation starters is really important. And that's what I'm seeing right now with more of these. Actually, some of them are AI powered platforms. So a lot of times, yes, there are humans involved in the assessment of companies, but a lot of times it goes through the algorithms first.
Okay, so I have another question, and this one I'm going to put to you first, McCarry. Can you talk about how tech and inclusion are driving gender equity in education?
Absolutely. So I think, from my perspective, we're really excited to see how girl gamers in particular and their adult influencers are responding to play experiences that are powered by tech and are anchored in inclusion. So if I was to share an analogy, building something in Minecraft or jumping through hoops in Roblox or shooting at something in Fortnite has high entertainment value. But girls are gleaning and really embracing opportunities in the gamified learning space where they are seen, where they are heard, experiences that deeply resonate with them, where they're able to connect dots between their creative imagination and the world of possibilities that exist for them in these meaningful life paths. So I think building with an inclusive lens allows us to serve these learners in a way that emboldens them to be confident and powerful and limitless in their mindsets, where they are the magic that they're creating in their play, and those qualities and characteristics that reside on the inside of them, those innate talents, gifts, and skills, become the superpowers that they then leverage to make true impact and change in the world. And the technologies out there, the immersive technologies, the AR and AI and ML and voice, etc., allows them to do all the things that they couldn't imagine within those play experiences. So I really think the combination of this inclusive approach powered by immersive and disruptive tech makes it safe, powerful, and transformational proposition for all of us.
Great.
What do you?
Ivy or Maddie, would you like to add anything to that? Talking about tech and inclusion.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I love Mukami's point, and I just love what you're building, by the way. Like,
it's awesome.
It's amazing. It's absolutely addressing, and like as a girl who always loved math, like that I love that. But I know from my space, from what we're building, we're really focused on figuring out a way to make a lot of things accessible just not necessarily based on gender, but also based on location. Like I know we're focused a lot on Latin America at the moment, and getting those who are in courses there able to connect with this classes in the US or in Asia Pacific or in Europe, and trying to make all of that a lot more accessible and inclusive, really, and bringing those voices to a platform where typically they're not able to have conversations, work on projects. And I think that in general, like the industry really focusing on remote learning is allowing a lot of that, bringing connection to places that weren't able to have it before. Even with connectivity issues, I know with our fortunate partnership with AWS, we've been able to bring that connectivity all over the globe easily, which has just been phenomenal, because we worked with an institution in Venezuela, for example, and this was the first time they were able to work with partners in a different country and really get that connection without having to do, like I was saying earlier, like study abroad, because that's not most people can't access that. So if you don't have those opportunities or those chances, I think tech's meeting people where they're left and really bridging those gaps. And I think there's a lot of momentum that direction.
Yeah, especially during the pandemic, right? No one had those opportunities, even the people that had the opportunity before. So
absolutely, yeah.
It's a really interesting point, and thank you for that.
I was smiling when Mukami said superpowers. I think that's actually a great word to kind of ignite something in our minds, that inclusivity is not just about the theoretical buckets that we've all been conditioned to think about, right? I think Dan Pink actually puts this really well. Someone I look up to from a behavioral science standpoint. He's like, inclusivity back in the days usually just means that you invite all the kids to the party, and it kind of just ends there. It means that every kid can attend the party, they can get through the door, but then no one's speaking to them, right? So accessibility, like Maddie said, it comes full circle. Like inclusivity now needs to kind of break out of those theoretical modes, and we need to adopt a little more systems thinking to think about, okay, well, all the kids are invited, but people are also playing with them, talking with them, making sure that they're having a good time. It needs to have extensibility. And I think that's another reason why there are a lot of great opportunities for technology to kind of, facilitate that. So we're not just letting everyone in, but then no one is actually achieving the right optimum and equitable learning experience that we have intended for.
Absolutely.
Oh, I love that. I really love that. That's a really great analogy. It's very easy for everyone to understand. So my last question really is for you guys to just tell us a little bit about the emerging and new opportunities that exist today. What can you tell us about that, Ivy?
Yeah, I'm constantly being inspired by everything that's out there. I'm a researcher in heart, so by trade as well. Well, I live and breathe it. So it's very hard for me to not always have sort of like a competitive analysis or a landscape in my mind constantly. So being a voice technology, Evermore is very much, trying to activate and empower the human voice, because due to just the natural evolution of how we've been communicating, there's a lot of this, and a lot of times that general conditioning actually depresses us. It actually not as a conditioned state, but it actually puts us in a depressive mood, because we are in a human body and we need to be activated in other ways. So learning is definitely now way more than reading. It's watching, it's playing, it's speaking up. And setting goals, right? So one thing that I'm seeing now is, for example, the UN, they're coming up with something called a global degree. And the mission statement is one world, 1 degree. How cool is that? I mean, that sounds like a lot of work. And And that's why I'm also following that very closely. Or things like Class Rebel, right? I like mentioning these also indirect competitors, because you know what, we are all there. There's enough opportunities for everyone. And what's really cool that they're doing is they're saying that it's modern skill set, and it's actually education from the street, right? So the teachers there aren't your atypical your typical professors or academics. They're really just masters in their own right, like masterclass. And I think, again, it takes that level of execution, really thinking, I know it's cliche, but cliches are truth, because you have to think outside of the old education box and sometimes the education system. There's still a lot of work to be done, of course, but they're all very exciting things happening on the horizon.
Very nice. I love that. Yes. So I said I was done with my questions, but we did have one question from the audience, and I'll throw it out to any of you to answer. What are the best ways that higher education institutions can address gender parity?
If I think about this in the context of what we're doing, it's tough. The reality is that gender parity is probably driven by the things that we're talking about, creating those solutions that support accessible experiences, inclusive experiences, and experiences that are deeply engaging for diverse learners with diverse perspectives and socializations, etc. I think embracing technology, embracing the various technologies out there that support that, everything from simple things like, 3D and 360 video, the AR, AI, and voice technologies. I think these are all powerful means through which educators can create solutions that would truly drive that gender parity. As I think about it in the context of the girl gamer, who I am, who my heart, mind, and soul are sold to and dedicated to. She just wants opportunities that were created for her, where she can thrive by just being herself. And she wants those opportunities to be interactive. She wants them to be multidimensional. And then the adult in her life wants those experiences to be empowering and inclusive and transformational. So I don't know, I feel like I'm repeating myself, except to say that to the extent that we can embrace the technologies that allow us to achieve that, then we're on the road to success with driving towards gender parity. I don't know, what do Ivy or Maddie feel?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was I love the question, because parity implies some kind of equalizing, right? Or even playing field. So again, when it can be easily politicized, at least this is how I think, because I do subscribe to AI ethics. In Evermore, there's a huge component of using machine learning to help people learn better. But it's also very much looking at their psychological states. So a lot of personal information, not in the traditional sense, but even more personal, because we're looking at people's inner thoughts. So it's really about intention, right? Like if we think about ethics, and while I'm not a trained philosopher, but I do like hanging out with philosophers who talk about these things. Parity is a huge hole to fill, in terms of we really have to look at our intentions and say, by achieving gender equality, we must do X, Y, and Z, right? Because when you start to kind of have those definitions, then on the day-to-day, operating as a business and also innovating as an entrepreneur, you can hold yourself accountable to certain things that you need to achieve. And in those lines, sometimes you might not map back to what you were trying to achieve. So I think it's about really understanding intention behind that, and then how you're measuring it, because you again, I love metrics for that reason, because if you're not measuring day in and day out, it's just another thing that holds you accountable. for the main goal.
Agree with that.
You know, in addition to that, Ivy, I love what you just said, and I'm thinking about the idea too of leveraging the community and the community partners as a means of driving that. So the measurement piece is crucial. One of the things that we're doing at Royals that I think is a little differentiated and would support that goal is we've created this parent dashboard that gives the parent line of sight to some of those data analytics elements that you're describing about their gamer that would help then drive conversations that they would have down the road about, you know, around the meaningful topics and themes that ultimately up-level her mindset around these issues. So recognizing that there's opportunities to partner with parents, with other influencers within these learners' lives, and giving them a sort of empowering them with the data and information that is necessary to drive through the conversations and work through the issues is a powerful way that we will get there.
Definitely.
Great. And Maddie, I was thinking about you when you said like you loved math, right? And it's about you getting the opportunities to actually express your love of math. So I think when I'm seeing that, I'm thinking about the opportunities, like, you know, ensuring that the women, the girls of today have the same opportunity to participate in the education, right? Tech is one big one, is, you know, let's offer it to them young and early, right? I just feel like that's part of it.
Absolutely.
Let them know they can too, like really empower that, like you got this, and momentum behind that as well.
Agreed. Well, I think with that, we are wrapping up. I really appreciate all of your time today, your thoughts, and your expertise in EdTech. It's really, truly been an honor to talk with you and get to know you guys better. Thank you. With that, I'm going to welcome Alec back to the stage. Alec?
Well, Grace Ann, thank you so much, you know, to you and to the entire AWS Edstart team for putting together this panel and moderating such a great discussion. And thank you, Ivy, Mukami, and Maddie for participating and sharing these perspectives. I think I walk out of this feeling like there's a lot of challenges ahead of us here, but I feel incredible optimism hearing the kind of work that you all are doing and the vision that you have for equity and for better learning outcomes for students everywhere. So thank you just so much for spending some time with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And with that, we're going to move into our next session, which is a slightly different conversation, where our last panel was really focused on the new technology supporting learning and students. Now we're going to talk a little bit about supporting and driving engagement with early stage innovators and entrepreneurs within the university setting. To start this conversation, it's my pleasure to introduce Nitin Mathur, One Valley's VP of Global Business Development, to share a little bit more about what One Valley does to operate in this space and support this ecosystem.
Thank you, Alec. My name is Nitin Mathur. I'm a Senior Partner Advisor and VP of Global Business Development here at One Valley. Being a strategic advisor to our partners in the higher ed space, interacting with leaders who are really at this sort of the helm of managing innovation, entrepreneurship programs at some of the top universities across the globe, I do tend to hear deep concerns about not being able to provide enough resources and the network to innovators across the institutions, be the students or the faculty who have some incredibly brilliant ideas they work with, struggle to commercialize them due to either lack of market insights, not having access to global network of mentors, capital, and customers, or more than often than not, actually, innovation managers at these departments are just so overwhelmed with a lot of administrative effort required to manage the community itself. Well, One Valley has taken a tech-first approach here to help higher ed institutions create a tight-knit private community of innovators, deliver right set of resources, and enable these early stage innovators to seamlessly connect with industry experts. Here's a short video which demonstrates some of the features of our flagship product, Passport OS.
Discover Passport OS by One Valley. Build, grow, and manage world-class startup and innovation communities. Passport OS supports some of the largest startup and innovation ecosystems from around the globe and is trusted by the top innovation ecosystems in higher education. Create a dynamic mentor network of experts and advisors and connect all the members of your ecosystem and highlight their work while providing investors, alumni, and other partners access to your ecosystem. Provide free-form content and curriculums and create standalone courses or multi-course modules. Access up to $1 million in free or discounted business tools and services while enjoying a robust content library that provides key learnings and best practices. Connecting with 450 plus engaged VCs and angel investors, and accessing self-service tools and templates. Easily create, manage, and run fully virtual, in-person only, and hybrid events with application, evaluation, and event management all in one place, creating streamlined experiences for applicants, admins, and judges. Host workshops and events for students on campus using a platform that is designed based on your brand specifications and has the flexibility needed to allow us to support your specific workflows. Easily manage your community with one central admin dashboard, featuring an integrated CRM that allows you to message your community via email, chat, Slack, or pop-up messages, and a robust analytics dashboard set up to track all key metrics for your program. Passport OS, support entrepreneurs on campus like never before.
Well, I hope you enjoyed learning about Passport OS. Just to recap, the Passport OS platform currently supports over 200,000 plus startups who are collectively raising around $500 million, host over 200 plus mentors from some of the largest enterprises, as well as investors. Any of the startups who are part of the One Valley can connect, and we're proud to make available over $1 million in free or discounted perks to startups. I do want to call out in the chat box, you will actually find a link to the One Valley pages, as well as a link to book a live demo with the One Valley team here. Now, as you watched, while One Valley's Passport OS brings most of the elements that universities need to build their innovation programs, but it's a combination of people, processes, and technology, in my opinion, that really creates success. To talk about it, I'd like to welcome one of our esteemed partners, John McCarry, Executive Director at University of North Texas, Murphy Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. Just to give you some background, John has actually worked in venture and private equity space for almost 20 years, has been pivotal to elevate, transform, and grow the innovation program at UNT for the past several years. He founded a Tokyo-based investment advisory firm, worked at one of the largest FMCG companies in the world, managed venture portfolio for a Hong Kong family office from where he has a lot to share interesting stories there, but also served in the United States Marine Corps. All in all, he's got deep experience working and evaluating cutting edge technology innovations, but also carry field level experience tackling early stage startups. John, welcome to the virtual stage.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's a pleasure and an honor to have you here. So just to start off a discussion, university students dedicating their time to sort of inventing something new and bringing it to market in order to create an impact, not an easy proposition in my opinion. And being an entrepreneur is hard enough in itself, let alone sort of being a student who is trying to get a degree at the same time, have limited entrepreneurial experience and are trying to perfect some of the complex new technologies there, right? In our discussion today, would love to touch upon some of the challenges for an early stage entrepreneur, role of the innovation program in higher ed, and how do you make these programs more successful? So John, would love to learn about the UNT Murphy Center here, your entrepreneurship program. What KPIs and indicators are most important for you and for the university?
Sure. So just a little bit about the Murphy Center in and of itself. So originally was founded back in 1999, went through a couple of iterations before I came on board. I think ultimately the initial iterations, I think, had the same or similar problems that a lot of universities face, is that they tend to be more academic focused as opposed to more practical in nature. When you're trying to get a company off of the ground, it's nice if you have theory, but ultimately you need to be able to get the market and generate sales, and that leads to traction with investors potentially. If you can't get that done, you're going to die. Really, when I came on board, what we tried to do was work with entrepreneurs, both alumni but also students, and help them actually focus more specifically on the niche that they fit within their company. If somebody is great in a technical background, let's say for example, and we have a couple of these in our current portfolio. Wonderful entrepreneur students, very creative, but come more from an engineering background. The last thing we wanted to do was, have them, putting together a pro forma, have them putting together HR policy, different things like this. Really, I think that's where a entrepreneurship center actually comes in and provides more value. What we do is actually we pair them up, either mentors or advisors, or we go out and we find other students that are interested in forming a company as well, so that they can complement that original inventor, so to speak, to help get this going. And we find that if everybody is contributing and pulling in the right direction, it's going to lead to better outcomes. So you mentioned some KPIs. We literally went from 0 companies 2 years ago to 16 that we have in the stable now. And just over the last year and a half, our companies have raised approximately $2.5 million. We're getting success. KPIs we look at generally tend to be amount of cap raised, viability. So are they continuing to grow? Are they even still alive at that point? And then more importantly, we also, it's difficult to get a read on this, obviously, but we at least try to get quarterly growth in terms of revenue numbers from the companies, if in fact they are generating revenue.
Yeah, thank you for that input. And trust me, aligning with the strategy of the university itself and helping the entrepreneurs in the early stages is something very important. I do have a question. So when you think of, you obviously worked tirelessly to sort of elevate the level of engagement in the innovation program. As you mentioned, there were just now not any of the startups, in fact, in the stable before. So congratulations for that. That's a great achievement. But it's also a constant battle the student face, sort of balancing their drive to pursue an idea in academics. You can imagine this is not the only one, right? You briefly touched upon some of the challenges there. Love to know your thoughts on that. What challenges innovators, entrepreneurs typically face? And these are early stage ones, especially when they're not, just about sort of having a great idea, but haven't launched a startup just yet, or maybe in early stages itself. And how has Murphy Center in the past have handled that?
Sure. I'd say probably the biggest challenge generally is getting an entrepreneur to stop focusing on being perfect, or trying to understand everything. I think the biggest issue typically faced is they all have this preconceived notion. Obviously, the news doesn't really help with this, but they all have this preconceived notion that if they're the CEO or if they're one of the founders, that somehow they need to be knowledgeable in every single subject that the company has to deal with. And the reality is it's just not true. what's more important than anything, and the best advice I ever received early on in my career is that you don't invest in particular product or in a particular service. You invest in the team. Team is everything, and somebody that's able to pick their partners well and understand their limits and what they need to fill in terms of gaps is going to be somebody that's going to be able to succeed. And so we work with our entrepreneurs to at least help them to identify that and realize that they're not going to be all things to everybody, but they do need to excel in the areas that they believe that they're strongest in, and ultimately that comes across. And in doing so, they focus on the material aspects of getting something to market as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm. That definitely helps. You touched upon early in the chat about some of the startups interacting with the others and sort of creating that complementary solution or sort of a complementary team that you're working towards at UNT. At One Valley, we truly believe giving access to some sort of a platform which brings the innovators from all walks of life to communicate and collaborate together is an important pillar of future success, right? And UNT Murphy Center Entrepreneurship Hub, supported by One Valley, was established back in 2019, bringing the innovators in a very tight-knit sort of a community online. How has that acted as a catalyst for the entrepreneurship program at UNT today? And how has the response been so far?
The response has been wonderful. We haven't received any, I guess I'm looking at it from the wrong direction, but we haven't received any negative feedback to date. And in fact, things have been, the feedback we've received from our entrepreneurs has been quite glowing. I would say, I'm retreading. I'm just retreading old sayings, and by covering this, but it's a sad reality. When you are starting a company, everybody feels like they're on an island and they're completely separated from everybody else. Especially when it comes to, well, if you don't have any friends that are also starting companies, it's very difficult to actually have a conversation with them about struggles that you're going through. And so in that regard, it is very, it can be quite onerous, but at the same time, because of the breadth of the community at One Valley, a lot of our entrepreneurs have felt that they could reach out at any point in time to somebody halfway around the world, be able to at least have a conversation with them about some struggles that they're also going through at the same time. This is one of the the benefits of being typically in a community that is growing quite rapidly. I think this is one of the strong benefits that at least I saw when I was with the family office years ago, investing in Silicon Valley. You would see companies that were just within a certain network, and they were building, one on top of each other. This because they could easily pick up the phone and give somebody else a call that they knew that also had a company going. Luckily, in North Texas, we're seeing a ton of activity, but at the same time, we have students that are from all over the region, and sometimes they're from case in point, we do have one company. He's from a very small town outside of San Antonio, so it's not like he can drive up, so I don't know. I don't even know how many hours that would be, like 7 hours to Denton, in order just to sit down and have coffee with people. So he's got to find another way to do that, and One Valley essentially allows him to get that done.
That's a great point. I want to quickly shift gears. I do have a question on Texas generally. So Texas continues to be one of the fastest growing states in the US. A lot of growth in terms of number of Fortune 500 companies relocating to the area. But we're actually seeing a huge upswing in entrepreneurial activity in the region itself. How is UNT equipping themselves to be the leaders, supporting entrepreneurs, and sort of bridging that gap that may exist between the activity in the East and the West Coast of the United States?
Yeah, it's a good question. And right place, right time, I guess, but ultimately, it's, yeah, I will say this, you can't do anything without great leadership. And the university has had some really wonderful leadership over the last few years. We had a president step in that really understands what it takes in order to build a strong community. And, you know, the Murphy Center's received nothing but support top down, including from the College of Business with Dean Wiley. So that being said, what we're not really it's one of those funny things. There are so many other entrepreneurship centers out there that if you're not a current student or if you're not an alumni, then don't bother picking up the phone and giving them a call. We don't operate in that capacity. You know, we're willing to work with lots of different groups, lots of different companies. And the only, really our main objective is to establish that relationship with the company. We want to see people succeed. Obviously, within the region is our main goal. But if we don't have that affiliation with the company, we will work to make that happen. So whether that's assigning interns to them, or working more on the technology side, we have quite a few companies that didn't have a relationship with the university previously and ended up licensing technology to them that allowed them to basically develop a leg up on the competition and get to market pretty quick with the defensible technology. Additionally, we've also made a very concerted effort to work with quite a few industry partners, from the Dallas Cowboys to DFW Airport, a number of airlines, logistics centers, Toyota. The names just go on and on and on. Some of those moving to Texas, but a lot of those we've just found that if you have a vision of where you think you're capable of going and you have the right resources, it's just a question of being able to get the right alignment and, more importantly, get the right people around the table.
Well, that's great. Trust me, there's so much of activity. I'm sure that will keep you a lot busier. Obviously, we're not running against time. I do want to wrap up. I have one last question for you. Our audience who's watching this event live include leaders from a lot of the various higher education institutions across the globe. COVID-19 obviously dampened a lot of the plans entrepreneurship innovation departments may have had in the past 2 years or so. And especially when students and faculty and alumni now started working remotely and in-person collaboration came to a standstill altogether. At One Valley, we still believe remote collaboration is here to stay in some fashion. What advice would you give to someone who's looking to reinvigorate and rejuvenate the entrepreneurship programs at the institution?
Good question. After this past year, especially, I would, of course, we'll be taking on more in-person activities, but to tell you the truth, when it comes to accessing resources, I'm a big believer in having that 100% virtual. I just don't see another way that it works, specifically for entrepreneurs, right? If I'm sitting at a coffee shop somewhere and I need to get away from the office, but I still need to access some resources, I want to be able to do it right then and there. I don't want to have to pick up and go, to a building or go somewhere and lock down some time. And goodness knows, in DFW, driving anywhere, you're talking about an hour in the car. I mean, that's a waste of time. So yeah, I think it makes, being able to access Passport for our entrepreneurs makes it, definitely more efficient. And also it's a great value for them, because ultimately, it's bite-sized. They can get what they're after, and then they can shut it down and then move on.
That is great advice. Trust me, I think with this pandemic and the changes that are taking place to go sort of all virtual, entrepreneurs definitely need a lot of the resources available at an instant's notice rather than travel all the way. But great advice. John, thank you so much. I do want to wrap up. Thanks again for joining us today, John, sharing secrets of his success, building the Next Gen Entrepreneurship Program at University of North Texas with us. We wish you and all the ventures you're working with continued success in the future.
Perfect. Thank you, Nitin.
Thank you so much. I do want to welcome back Alec. Alec, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Nitin and John. It was really interesting to hear the perspective from University of North Texas and the growth over the past couple of years of the Murphy Center. So congratulations, and always excited to collaborate with you and UNT on the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Of course, in One Valley fashion, we had to turn this into a pitch event. So we have the next segment, a great 15 minutes where we'll hear from 3 early stage founders that are coming out of or participating in the University of North Texas Murphy Center for Entrepreneurship. And it'll be a 5-minute pitch of each one of their companies. I would highly recommend and ask that you vote and rate on the companies right below the video. You can pick your favorite. And ultimately we'll be awarding a winner of the pitch competition based upon your audience vote. So you're going to get to decide kind of who your favorite early stage company from this competition is. So first, it's my pleasure to introduce you to the companies that will be participating today and the speakers that will be participating today. First, we'll be hearing from Nikita Sisk, the CEO and founder of Utilize. Then we'll be hearing from Enrique Trevino, the founder of Thoughtful Snacks. And finally, we'll be hearing from Abby Cawthorn, CEO and co-founder of Tomorrow and Tonight. And so, with that, I'm incredibly excited to welcome our first presenting company to the virtual stage. And that is, it's my pleasure to welcome Nikita Sisk, founder and CEO of Utilize.
Hi, my name is Nikita Sisk, founder and CEO of Utilize, a blockchain-enabled skills-based recruiting platform where we can deliver a match you can trust. So just want to quickly highlight some of our early successes. I want to thank Southern Methodist University and University of Charleston for the opportunity to partner as pilot site customers. So I've spent the last 20 years of my career helping different types of companies find the resources and talent needed for in-demand jobs. And so I've switched my focus to the other side of the table, helping more talent find the employers that they need with a focus on students, because they are the future and they are our future leaders. And right now, students are confused about how to stand out in a crowded market. With the nation facing a workforce crisis, students are uncertain about the job market and want a way to help out. And so we're here to quiet some of the noise. So imagine a world where skills and potential were the basis used for recruiting. Unfortunately, that world does not exist today, but what does exist are poor methods that result in poor matches. Those poor matches are resulting in an $8 trillion loss to GDP. Existing methods fail to bridge the skills mismatch and miss the mark for inclusive hiring when it comes to students. So what? Well, improving matchmaking allows for better opportunities, decreases unemployment, and strengthens the economy. Luckily, there's a meeting of the minds. Both employers and job seekers want new ways of finding each other, and both want ways to stand out so that they can match better. That's where Utilize comes in. The Utilize platform is a solution designed around a trust triangle of verifiers forged around a common purpose to verify, consume, and share the data contained in smart portfolios. How it works is Utilize's software is integrated within post-secondary schools and used for student recruiting. Students create these smart portfolios free of charge, which allows more students to show up in a different way in the recruiting platform. Schools subscribe and pay an annual fee of $20,000 to $30,000 for platform and services. Employers pay a monthly or annual subscription fee with an annual fee ranging from $4,000 to $6,000, and they get to search the smart portfolios by skills to find students. They also get to post unlimited jobs and attend career events. So you're probably wondering, what is a smart portfolio? Smart portfolios are AI-powered digitized resumes for skills and storing credentials, similar to the Apple Health app, but for job seekers, a new way of hiring and gaining insights into the labor market. So while our solution is still being built, we've still had some early successes with using manual skills-based practices. Meet Kate. Kate is an actual student at one of our pilot site schools, and working with us for the past 30 days, she's been able to obtain a full relocation offer from a global financial services company for a summer internship. So while we're still exploring our financial models, 2 revenue streams are for post-secondary schools and employers, with the future revenue streams being API offerings. Utilize delivers both a financial and social ROI. Utilize uses a collective impact model to bring people together in a structured way to provide economic, workforce, and global recruiting intelligence so the entire workforce can make smarter, more informed decisions. The market that we're playing is the human capital market, which is about a $17.5 billion market. And we're focused on those 32 million small and medium-sized businesses in the IT and financial industry and the 6,300 post-secondary schools, private and public, and will expand to other non-traditional type of schools in the future. Our value proposition with our competitors is around data sharing with trust and privacy. We are building a difficult to replace solution with no direct competitors. We're building for the next generation. Again, designing a new workforce analytics platform. A little bit about our team. We are a diverse, high-performing team of builder integrators that have the domain expertise. Peter and I have known each other for about 9 years. We worked together previously at Boeing. And so since we're operating at the intersection of EdTech and WorkTech, which is a huge space, we need a few key resources to succeed. Connections to schools and employers, exposures to events like this, partnerships with thought leaders, and ongoing support and mentoring. UNT Murphy Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation has helped greatly with connecting us to the right people and events to move our mission forward. They also provided us access to the Passport by One Valley, which provided exclusive access to exclusive events, mentoring, VC connections, and curated resources for Black and female founders. It's been a phenomenal tool to have in our toolkit as an early stage entrepreneur. Again, we appreciate all our partners that are taking this journey with us and supporting us in various ways. My name is Nikita Sisk, founder and CEO of Utilize, and I'd like to thank you for learning more about what we have to offer. We welcome any opportunities to collaborate in the future. Thanks so much and have a great day.
Well, I really want to thank Nikita for sharing her pitch of Utilize with us. It's incredibly exciting to see new tools developing at the intersection of work and education and bridging that gap to fill the job needs of tomorrow. So a big thanks to Nikita and really excited to see what comes next for the Utilize team. Next, we'll hear from Enrique, who is we'll hear from Enrique, who is the founder of Thoughtful Snacks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Enrique Trevino, and I'm currently a senior at UNT. And by the way, I'm also a 20-year-old entrepreneur, and my company sells chocolate-covered pork rinds. Now, ever since I was a little kid, I've always loved pork rinds, but one thing that I didn't like about them was that they always tasted really greasy, and this is due to them being deep fried, oftentimes even being fried with lard. Another thing I could never wrap my head around was why the heck does nobody ever sell them covered in chocolate? It seems like it would be the perfect mix of crunchy, salty, and sweet. So in response to the first problem, last year, my parents and I started making our own homemade pork rinds in our kitchen, but instead of deep frying them, we air fried them. And just as I suspected, it cut out 100% of the greasiness, and it gave them a much lighter and crispier taste. And that is how pork rinds should taste all the time. And in response to the second problem, we did the obvious thing. We cover them in chocolate. And from that, our signature product, Cocoa Chops, was born. 100% air fried chocolate covered pork rinds. And in this picture right here, you can see our 5 delicious chocolate flavors. Now, after we started making these, we thought, let's get this out there into the community. So we started going to local San Antonio area farmers markets, and we started selling, and we sold several bags at those farmers markets, countless bags. But even more encouraging than the sales was the reaction of the people. People loved Cocoa Chops. A lot of them were surprised even doubtful at first when they saw chocolate covered pork rinds. But once we started handing out free samples, people were buying bags and they were telling us, this is the most surprisingly delicious thing. Who would have thought of this? This is amazing. This goes awesome together. And once we got that feedback from so many people, we started thinking to ourselves, this idea has a potential to go to great heights. So finally, earlier this year, we set up our own official company, Thoughtful Snacks. And so far, we have 5 sales to 5 different stores in the San Antonio area, and Cocoa Chops are doing amazing at those stores. And speaking of that, I've been reflecting on my experience as an entrepreneur lately, and I would say it's definitely been challenging. Like waking up early in the morning on the weekends to go to farmers markets is challenging. Nailing down the process of actually making Cocoa Chops the best I possibly can, it's also been a challenge, but it's also been so rewarding whenever I make a sale to a store and I know that the customers in there will have the opportunity to try our amazing snack. It's been so rewarding whenever we go to farmers markets and people tell us that they love our product. They never would have thought of it. It's so delicious. So I wouldn't change a single thing about this. I'm going to spend even more time on this after I graduate from college. But in the meantime, we also have hopes to expand, and we are taking steps to achieve those expansion goals. We're always going to new stores, dropping off free samples of Cocoa Chops to owners, and always trying to get our product out there to different stores. And we're also currently in the process of acquiring a trademark. We have a trademark application pending with the USPTO. And once we get that trademark registered, we definitely plan on approaching bigger stores such as H-E-B, Buc-ee's, Walmart, you name it. We are going to approach those big stores. And we're also in the process of having a professional website made. But in the meantime, you can find us on thoughtfulsnacks.etsy.com, where we sell packs of all 5 of our flavors. And we sold to places like Denton, Houston, we even had a customer in Missouri. So that was really awesome. It's great to get our Cocoa Chops outside of Texas, across the whole country. And all the while, we still remain faithful to our roots. We still go to San Antonio area farmers markets, and we're always connecting with customers. On the bottom left right here is a fun little video of some of our customers' amazing reactions at farmers markets. And last but not least, we're also working on a sugar-free flavor to appeal even more to the keto market, because low carb, low sugar is very important to them. So finally, I would like to thank all of you for giving me the opportunity to share about Thoughtful Snacks and Cocoa Chops here. I'm very ambitious and very excited for what the future holds for me as an entrepreneur and for Cocoa Chops as a product. On behalf of my parents, they would like to thank y'all as well in order to for giving us this opportunity. And if you have any questions, please contact me. And thank you so much. Y'all have a great day.
It's wonderful to learn about Cocoa Chops, and we certainly need more innovation in the snack food industry. So it's great to see the progress you've had, and congratulations on just going out there and experimenting and doing it. So again, that was Enrique, the founder of Thoughtful Snacks. For the final presentation, we'll be hearing from Abby Cawthon, founder of Tomorrow and Tonight. We'll take it away.
Hi, my name is Abby Cawthon, and I'm the founder of Tomorrow Tonight, and I'm so excited to be presenting for you guys today. A special shout out to UNT and One Valley for making this possible. A little background on me is I am a music fanatic, and I have a huge passion for live music. That's part of the reason I started this company. Tonight is not only going to change how fans do concerts, but going to change how artist relationships with fans for the better. So without further ado, the show never stops, so we'll see you tomorrow and tonight. The problem currently is that direct transportation for vans to venues is not currently available. Sleeping is not an option for safe overnight transportation, and there's a huge disconnection between artists and fans that take place on tour. Our solution is our company that works directly with artists to rent out space for fans to attend multiple shows on tour and connect with them. We have direct transportation to each venue, living accommodations with water, electricity, rest area, and personal living space, and a personal connection with artists. As I call it, living like a rock star. The market size is 170.60 million people that attend concerts in 2019, and 1.2 million tickets are purchased with VIP. And Of those 1.2 million, they generate 25% of the revenue. 44% of festival fans are willing to spend 50% more on VIP tickets, while 28% are willing to spend double. And there's a huge revenue growth in the market as live music's been put on hold. And we're looking at $1.28 billion before everything was put on hold. And with artists coming back stronger than ever, especially those who make their living based on tours, it's going to be growing exponentially in the next 3 to 5 years. Our product is relatively simple. It's a fan tour bus. You set up your profile, pick your dates, and hop on board. Our revenue is, we're looking over $115,000 in one tour. We're looking over $1,000 a day and over $300,000 every year per bus. This is more than just, one and done. Each artist, we're looking at some of the biggest artists on the planet. So you're thinking Harry Styles, Taylor Swift, Ariana Grande. If each of them had their own bus and their own tours we could coordinate with individually, you're looking at $300,000 coming in. It could easily turn into daily. Our business model, this is our little business model that we currently have picked out, and this is based on per tour. These are all based on the 2019 models that have been officially, have tour dates moved around, blah, blah, blah. But this is what I had to work with when it was created. We're looking at the Fine Line Tour, which had 77 days, 41 dates. He is what Harry Styles, like I said, these bigger pop artists are in high demand, but let's not forget our smallest artists that maybe not everyone has heard of, like Sad Summerfest, which features All Time Low, if you've heard their latest radio hit Monsters, The Maine, and Destroyed Boys, along with some other friends. They're a 7-band lineup, and their fan base is extremely dedicated. I have, there's documented All Time Low fans that have not only followed them on entire tours, but there's multiple people that have done that, or entire sections in the country, like, oh, I'll do the Midwest portion of the tour, be on the road for 2 weeks for everything from Baltimore all the way down to Wisconsin. So our revenue model is fairly simple and straightforward. We have expenses, salary, payroll, all that good stuff. And this is currently based on 6 people, but we've currently redone our vehicle design in the last 30 days, and we're going to be able to fit up to 9 people on one vehicle comfortably and safely. And although we do have competitors, none of them quite have the impact that we do, as we are first to market for directly with live music events. We're not focused on those stops in between. We're getting you from each venue and you're living like a rock star every second of that day. We're first to market. We're more cost effective than those who have already been doing this by themselves and have to pay for hotels, flights, transportation, Airbnbs for each stop. Why do that when you can do it all in one? And it's an exclusive experience that they'll miss out. They try to do it without us. And it's more time effective. Those people who have been doing this in the past are part of the reason I got the inspiration for this company. Waste hours and hours and hours, and those who I've talked to who have followed tours said they would much rather spend a little bit more money and not have to spend the hours and hours and hours in front of a computer picking out their Airbnb, picking out their airfare, hunting for those great deals. If they could have it all in one, it is a great deal. And it's going to be safe, as we're going to be providing background checks for everyone who chooses to travel on board with us. I'm currently our team. I'm pursuing my BA in Integrated Business Studies with a focus on finance and entrepreneurship from the University of North Texas with employment history and customer service. I've attended over 40 concerts by age 19. I play 5 musical instruments, and I am that diehard music fanatic that I took into account when building this company. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to present today. If you'd like to learn more, my website is www.tomorrowandtonight.com. My name, if you haven't heard already, is Abby Kaufman. You can reach me at that phone number. Email me tomorrowintonight@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter.
Well, it was great to hear about Tomorrow and Tonight, and I really want to thank Abby for sharing the pitch. This is just an example of the type of student entrepreneurs that are emerging from universities and higher ed institutions across the entire country. So it was really exciting for us to have the opportunity to highlight this group and share a little bit more about the work that they're doing. So again, I want to give a special thanks to my colleague Nitin, as well as John from the University of North Texas, and all of those exceptional student entrepreneurs. As we look at the people building the companies of tomorrow, the employers of tomorrow, and it's just a really exciting thing to see. So without any further ado, we'll be transitioning to our final content session. Last but certainly not least, and it is an opportunity to have a fireside chat on the future of higher education, disruption and opportunities that are in front of us. And there's been plenty of discussion that the past year has been absolutely transformative for the higher education industry. And we're going to really dive deep into some of those topics and trends and think about what the future holds. To get us started there, it's my pleasure to welcome back Nikhil Sinha, CEO of One Valley, who will be having a great conversation with Rick Levin, the former president of Yale University and CEO of Coursera. Nikhil, over to you.
Thanks, Alec. Delighted to have with us today Rick Levin, who served as president of Yale from 1993 to 2013, 20 significant years for the university, during which time he rebuilt the campus, focused on not just improving the state of the university, but also the state of the local community by redeveloping downtown New Haven, built and purchased a new West Campus for the university, co-founded the Yale NUS College in Singapore and launched scores of new programs. After leaving Yale, a year later, Rick took over as CEO of Coursera, which most of you are probably familiar with, the world's largest higher education technology platform, with over 4,000 courses from top universities, over 80 million registered learners now, and thousands of enterprises and other universities served as customers. During his tenure at Coursera, the company grew its learners by a factor of 3 and its revenue by a factor of 50. Rick currently continues to serve as senior advisor to Coursera, as well as to GSV Ventures and the TPG Rise Fund. He's a director of C3.ai and a senior fellow at Yale's Jackson Institute for Global Affairs. Rick is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the American Philosophical Society, and the Council on Foreign Relations, and a good friend and mentor of mine. Thank you so much for joining us today, Rick.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Nikhil. Always fun to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks. So I'd like to start at a sort of personal level before we get into some of the more macro questions. You've been a professor, faculty member, chair of a department, president of a university, and CEO of a technology company, Edtech company as well. How has this experience been, going from roles within the institution, going from faculty member to president, and then transforming late in your career into an Edtech CEO, Silicon Valley Edtech CEO, no less?
Yeah, it's been a wonderful journey, I have to say. I mean, I've enjoyed every step of the way, and in a certain sense, at every level, I could have stopped and been perfectly content without doing the next thing. So I love being a faculty member. I love mentoring students. I had 62 dissertations that I supervised in my 19 years on the faculty, and that that kind of generativity was really fun and interesting for me. But I always kept gravitating toward leadership positions, even as an assistant professor. Taking on projects and running various centers and grants and whatever. And so the progression from professor to department chair to briefly a dean for 9 months and then president was actually kind of natural and didn't seem like that discontinuous. Although if you stopped and say, how different was it being president of a community with 12,000 students and 12,000 staff and 150,000 alumni, it was very different from being an assistant professor in the economics department, I'll tell you, in terms of what you did every day and the scope of your responsibilities and the knowledge you had to have to do the job. But that in one way was all kind of a continuous evolution. Going from this community of 200,000 people or so, where I was the the leader, to what was then a 50-person startup with virtually no revenue, was a discontinuous change of the first order. And many things carried over. I mean, the human skills you need to run an organization aren't really that different. and the conceptual skills you need in terms of understanding that you need to have a vision and that you need to have a strategy to implement that vision, and you need to communicate in order to make it work. Those things are common, whether it's a small company or a very large nonprofit organization. But what was most dramatically different, I would say, were two things. Speed and the risk tolerance. So in a small startup, I mean, you know, this is a cliche now, and your audience knows this, but in a small startup, you have to move quickly. You have to not be afraid of failure. You have to reverse yourself quickly if you fail. That whole iteration. And Nikhil hasn't fully disclosed that he actually worked for me at Coursera for a period of time in a variety of absolutely essential senior positions that helped us establish our business model. But there were times when we actually completely reversed course, and learn, and because of the kind of quick feedback you can get through A/B testing, just flipped over almost instantly back to what we were doing before when we made a big product change that didn't work. So that kind of nimbleness and ability to take risk was very different from running a big old conservative institution like Yale, where we de-risked everything before we moved. We basically planned things out very carefully, took the time to cultivate the various constituencies, got the faculty on board, got the leadership, got the deans and so forth all lined up. And so when we made big changes, and we made a great deal of big change when I was running Yale, it was going to work. We knew it was okay. We knew it was going to. By the time we did it, we had buy-in, and we weren't really taking that much risk. So that was hard to get used to, but it was obvious that that's the way you had to operate.
Thanks. You have this terrific vantage of having led a traditional, campus, well-established old university that is a leader in the field, on the one hand, and then having led and helped establish the leader in, higher education, online learning. And from that vantage point, how do you see now the impact of technology on traditional institutions and the evolution of higher education, the university campus? How does it evolve hand in hand with this new emerging technology landscape?
Yeah. So the reason I joined Coursera and was willing to be, to take the bait and come join Coursera, really was that I thought that technology offered enormous opportunity to the existing institutions to improve themselves and to broaden their mission and to think really radically differently about what a university is and is for in the 21st century. And I saw this as early as 1999, 2000, when Yale started its first set of online programs. And I really had a lot of faith and confidence that this was going to be an important change in a much more radical way than all this talk about how COVID has changed the university. COVID has changed the university not very much, actually, when you get right down to it. I mean, the fact people went online and had Zoom classes, it worked. It was a great Band-Aid for a crisis, but it doesn't even begin to exhaust the potential of what online learning can do. And the main thing that's important, in my view, about online learning is it allows you to reach a vastly expanded audience. So this is my point about, and this is what I saw, now 20 years ago or more, that the university, which has heretofore dealt with essentially very small numbers of people. I mean, even the big state institutions only have 40 or 50,000 students. and the precious ones, the Yales and the Harvards, have 12 to 15,000 students. This is not nearly what we're capable of, and we have the leading experts. Top universities are an immense concentration of some of the leading educational talent in the world, and the research leaders in virtually every field. And why not share what they have to say with the world? And so the idea, and this is what was so appealing about Coursera, that was exactly its mission, was to expand access to the world's best higher education. And universities have still been, even though lots more participating, it hasn't really yet gripped their soul in the way that I think it should. There are a few institutions who've got it. Certainly Michael Crow at Arizona State, he's got it. Southern New Hampshire University, they've got it. University of Michigan, very close to getting it. But the point is, there are all these new audiences, and you can serve people not just when they're 18 to 22 as undergraduates or in their 20s as graduate students, but all through their lifetime, and with valuable things for them to do. To learn. So that's what excited me. And by the way, this solves the chronic cost disease that plagues higher education, because the chronic cost disease is entirely a function of the fact that the labor to output ratio in universities, labor productivity, hasn't changed in hundreds of years, or at least 100 years. That is to say, if the ratio of faculty to students is constant over time, you're not going to get the kind of productivity growth that other industries get, and consequently your relative price is going to rise, which is exactly what's happened with universities. But now we can expand the audience with the existing faculty by dramatic numbers and get people to pay something for it. Maybe not nearly as much as they pay for the live experience, but it's a new revenue source that allows the university to grow and prosper and not raise tuition, inflation plus 2% every year to the resident students. So I don't see technology necessarily displacing residential education, particularly at the better schools. I see instead, in the longer run, those universities simply expanding their mission and saying our mission isn't just to educate this highly selective core of people, but to actually reach a much broader audience.
I think that's a really important point. When we were at Coursera, we like to say that Coursera has extended the university campus in time and space. And and instead of looking at the education technology platforms as disruptive of higher education, looking at them as the ability to extend and expand the impact of traditional higher education, I think is absolutely the right way to look at this. One of the things that Coursera and other higher education technology companies have been able to do is to provide new sort of learning products that we wouldn't find traditionally on campus. Yeah. The definition of a course changes from what it is on a university campus and what it is when it goes on an education technology platform. If we just think about that, you see, at least within the traditional higher education environment, changes taking place to the nature of the learning products that we create within higher education institutions. And does the 4-year undergraduate degree remain the standard of what your first contact with the university would be, or should we see some changes in that model as well being brought about by technology?
I think we'll see some changes. I think we'll also see some changes within the context of the 4-year undergraduate degree. So the changes outside that would be certificate programs, particularly, I hope, in community college, at the community college level, that are more vocationally oriented, and give up what is, if you look statistically, more or less a fantasy that community colleges are primarily a pathway to 4-year institutions. They're not. I mean, 10 or 15% of the students in community colleges actually finish a 4-year higher education degree. I mean, it is a pathway, but that's not the principal function. The principal function is to jobs. And And why do you need a 2-year associate's degree necessarily for every job? And particularly, why do you need a 2-year associate's degree in some liberal arts framework when you could have a strictly vocational course that whatever was needed to train you for that vocation? Maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's 9 months, maybe it's 1 year, but not uniformly 2 years. And you know, I think Coursera is innovating in this space, and I think that I am hoping that the community colleges will follow and use some of the stuff that we're creating, such as the Google's IT support certificate. This is to take people with a high school education and make them IT technicians, so they can provide desktop or laptop support or work in a mainframe computer center. They don't have to be programmers. They don't have to do coding, but it's like learning a trade, in some ways. And that's been immensely successful. And there are a number of community colleges that are starting to adopt that as part of their 2-year associate's degrees. But why not have those colleges offer things like that, professional certificates or training certificates, as a course of study? Because what they offer that Coursera can't is the live interaction with faculty. And in fact, we know that for that program, we see greater success ratio among students who combine the program with some kind of live mentoring. There's several nonprofits, including one of my favorites, Merit America, that essentially takes that certificate program and a couple of others and takes students from, with live mentoring, 6 months of investment of time, takes students from $20,000 a year jobs to $50,000 a year jobs. It's really inspiring to see. So I do think that'll be one big shift. I mentioned also what will happen in the context of the 4-year degree program. I think modularizing some of this vocational training and inserting it into part of an undergraduate program could be extremely useful. I mean, if you were that way, if you were a traditional humanities major or psych major or studying a subject that didn't clearly lead directly to career opportunities, you could be picking up some core business skills in a set of modular training programs that would enable you to get a job when you graduate. And to roll that in and fold it in, I think that is very likely to happen in the future, but maybe not as quickly as you and I would like.
Thanks, Rick. Talking about jobs, and I just changed the subject a little bit. Entrepreneurship, which is what One Valley supports around the world, is also now not just universities preparing people for jobs, but really the idea of universities preparing entrepreneurs and for people to go out and start and launch their own businesses is becoming important. I think people are understanding that entrepreneurship is an important component of future economic development in their economies. What roles and how do you think universities should go about thinking about creating and supporting entrepreneurship on campus, but also in their local communities or in their states and in the country as a whole?
Yeah, well, many universities have committed to building programs in this area, and in both types, both educational programs and opportunity creation for their students, and also by investing in trying to build startup hubs in their local communities, because this is very healthy for the local economies. At Yale, we did all of the above. Other places like MIT have been doing all of the above for decades. And I think increasing numbers of schools have not just some entrepreneur courses, courses in the entrepreneurship courses in the curriculum, but entrepreneurial centers which are essentially laboratories for the undergraduates to start businesses. And maybe there's some for-credit component of this, but in a lot of cases it's a not for credit supplemental activity, but with mentoring and with help with competitions to encourage people to write the best business plans, with even angel invest. At Yale now we give very small angel investments to undergraduates and professional school students as well, to get started with their companies. And there's a kind of a thriving ecosystem of these young startups. One of the problems in New Haven, Connecticut is these things get started and then all the young people want to move to New York or Boston or Silicon Valley. But we've tried our best and we've created space. We've built incubator space off campus in New Haven for student-led companies, and by the way, for faculty-led companies as well, to help to create a stronger ecosystem locally. And I don't think we're certainly not unique in this. There are many schools doing this, and it's in my view, very healthy development.
I think the issue of student entrepreneurs then leaving the communities is a big issue in a number of places that are not Silicon Valley in New York or Boston. And one of the reasons we developed Passport was really to overcome that challenge by bringing the resources that the startups in these big innovation hubs get and making them available to entrepreneurs no matter where they are. And so, we recently did a launch of a Passport platform in Pittsburgh that's designed for entrepreneurs in Pittsburgh to get all the resources they need to start their businesses. Yeah. And we'll continue to do that as well going forward.
You know as well as I, this is kind of taking off. I mean, it's being enhanced by the sort of the beginning of a migration out of Silicon Valley because of the cost of living toward places like Salt Lake City, Denver, Austin, Texas, but Pittsburgh, and there's a bunch of communities that I think are doing well. And they're usually communities with a local university that is a contributor to making that an attractive ecosystem and ensuring a labor supply.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that therefore our focus on equipping universities to get all of the resources that their entrepreneurs need so that they can not only build their startups on campus, but stay in the local community once they've launched their businesses as well. Just a quick reminder to the audience, if you have any questions for Rick, please add it to the chat. We'll take a few questions if we have time at the end. Rick, looking at the, where universities go from here, what are the sort of defining characteristics in your mind about universities that will evolve successfully from this point onwards, both in terms of the traditional education, but also in the embrace of technology? And what should university leaders be now thinking about as we now come out of the pandemic and with this increased adoption of technology, about directions in which they should take their institution? So is there a reformed or new vision for the university leadership to be looking for now?
Yeah, well, I think maybe we kind of covered this. I think the notion of broader audiences, of more vocational opportunities for students who are residential, those are key, I think, to making the university more serviceable in the 21st century, and to not letting the ever-growing cost discourage people from attending four-year colleges and universities. I mean, it's still the best investment you can make in your human capital. To go to a four-year undergraduate degree, the rate of return is astounding, and the boost to lifetime income still is on the order of 70 to 80%. Relative to a high school diploma, so that will persist. But if the university is really to take on the challenges of the future, I think it should be thinking about both those things, three really. Incorporate, use technology to reach larger audiences, use technology on campus to enhance the learning experience, and use technology or not, but one way or the other, create modules for students that give them vocational opportunities. And that's not a movement, in my view, that's not a movement away from the liberal arts concept. It's actually a way to keep taking liberal arts subjects and still having reasonable employment opportunity. I mean, 25 years ago, you could walk out of a Yale or a Stanford and be an English major and get a great job. because you went to a great school and people didn't care what your major was. But that's not true anymore. You know, it's less true today. And so I think we need to think about giving people business background or enough coding skills or something, you know, that gives them an opportunity to, you know, to start careers and get decent jobs.
Yes. Well, it's always a pleasure talking to you, Rick. Thanks for joining us once again, joining the One Valley community. And I know that for me, as always, this is a great learning opportunity to talk to you. And I'm sure it's been that way for our audience as well. So thanks once more. And now over and back to you, Alec.
Thank you. Thank you, Nikhil.
Thank you both very much, Rick and Nikhil. It was, you know, again, incredible to hear those perspectives and insight into both kind of the challenges and the opportunities that they're in front of higher education going forward. So I really want to thank you. I want to thank all of our speakers who were with us today and took times out of incredibly busy schedules to share their thoughts with the audience on, you know, I think what is one of the defining questions of today, which is the role of universities and higher ed institutions in entrepreneurship, in innovation, and in creating or, you know, helping address some of the massive challenges that we face as a world. So it was incredible having such a great caliber and diversity of people here today. And I also want to thank our audience for spending the time with us as we dove into these various topics. Before we finally wrap up and say goodbye, I'm honored and excited to get to announce the winner of the UNT Startup Showcase. You had the opportunity to see three student entrepreneurs pitch their startups, and without further ado, our winner of the showcase was Utilize. And so, you know, incredibly excited to, you know, to congratulate Nikita and the Utilize team. Really excited to see the work that you're doing, bridging skills and education to the jobs of today and tomorrow. And it's so incredibly relevant for the topic of the conversation today, that it's great that you had the opportunity to participate and win the showcase. And with that, you know, I want to thank you all for joining us. That's the end of our content for today, but we'd love to keep the conversation going in the chat. If there are other topics you'd like us to address in the future, we'd love you to reach out to the One Valley team. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're a university leader and you're looking to build your ecosystem and support, you know, you either create your venture or support your student entrepreneurs, come to theonevalley.com. Explore Passport OS, reach out to our team because we'd love to talk to you. Because in the end of the day, our mission is to support entrepreneurs across the world and the organizations that support entrepreneurs and empower entrepreneurs. So thank you again for being with us, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.